Let's refresh me.
Still says 329 on the link.
Okay, fresh cough drop.
So no Tony W this week.
No Tony W, no Josh yet.
I don't think Josh will probably be joining us by the sound of it.
Well, we're going to have to edit the show notes then. Bye, Josh.
Hey, he's going to be a working man at the end of the summer, so
Oh,
he'll
goodness.
have loads of time. He's going to be an apprentice.
An apprentice what?
He's been offered a job in doing as an apprentice developer.
Oh, wow. So by the time he graduates high school, he'll be making more money than me.
Well, no, because he'll be an apprentice. He'll be on about £4 an hour.
That's almost as much money as I get. Of course, the way the quit is going to go, it might be less.
Yeah, it might be $2 by the time Josh gets there. He won't be able to afford holidays to New York.
All right, I am going down and deleting Josh.
Shock horror. There again, he might have other sources of income, shall we say?
Mm-hmm. So no Tony W.
Are you saying he's selling drugs?
No. More legitimate ones to do with the tech world.
Freelance stuff.
Prescription drugs.
Anybody else got anything for check this out? It's Leo and me so far.
No, I haven't got anything. Oh, just a minute. New mentions. Let's have a look. Public general. That's the live stream. Hey, does it say? Oh, it does. It says 3:30. I better refresh me live stream thing. Yay! Says 3:30. Let's go on to YouTube.
I may have to make the switch. And it's
working as well.
I may have to become a Firefox user again.
Well, I've never stopped. I delete Chrome every time I install something.
Hey, you said that a minute ago, Joe. I have to become a Firefox user again.
I may have to. Well, consistently, because I've been using Chrome for years now, and I used to be a Firefox user.
No, I was listening to the stream, and it just came back through.
I install Chrome just to uninstall it.
Well, I even uninstall the FFmpeg Chrome plugin, which every distro I know wants to install that plugin, whether there's Chrome or not.
We got a lot of idlers in the chat room.
You do?
Oh, I'll pull up the chat. And which chat room?
The MIBI-bit thing.
Londoner just came in. So besides me and Tony Hughes and Joe, Londoner is probably the only real live person in there.
It's the only real person.
Most of those names are there, whether they're there or not. I see Ant-Man in there, but it might just be a placeholder.
Swift. Yeah.
A5TUX.
Kutuzov.
He's here for real now.
Who is?
For real, for real.
The number one man.
It's a Leo.
Hey, the real Leo.
Here's Leo.
Hey, it's bang on. 3:00 your time.
Yes, it is. Get this show on the road, people. We haven't even got our Audacities running yet.
Oh, that'll take 2 seconds.
Ha 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 ha.
Speak for yourself, Moss.
I'm ready to
the
go.
link is still going.
Mine's
to
on pause.
329.
Mine's ready to go.
Yep, all I have to do is hit the pause button and let the silence roll.
Ooh, hang on. Let me save it. That's what I didn't do.
Oh, let me press
Okay,
record
now
on
3:30.
Mumble.
Yes, please. For some reason, yours comes out way better than mine does. Wouldn't that happen?
All right, we are mumble recording.
We're Mumble recording.
And the live stream's up.
Someone's
Who's
echoing.
echoing? I
Someone
hear no
is.
echo.
Not me. I muted.
I
and-
can hear an echo.
Hmm.
Well, it's gone now.
Okay. Well, I
Must have
did
been-
not hear an echo.
Oh.
All right, hang on. Before we go, I didn't get a chance to tweet this, so let me do that real quick.
I managed to just sneak in what our next episode is in the show notes.
Is it?
What is our next episode?
The 20th, 22nd.
Yeah. I was talking last night, guys, that I'd be there for the 22nd, but then I realised I can still make the 22nd. It's just I realised I'm going away again for a week on the Monday, so I won't be able to do any of the editing again.
Well, all right.
I feel I'm slacking.
I know the feeling.
I can edit to this week's show because I don't think I'm going to do ECN tomorrow.
Woohoo! Well, not that you're going to not do ECN, but that you can edit the show.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, should we get our noise reduction silence in?
Yeah. Is everyone ready to do 3, 2, 1 record?
Give me like 30 more seconds. Hang on.
Okay.
We'll offer you 5.
I'll take 15.
Boop, 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 boom.
Oh. The thing, the hard part is not like posting it. The hard part is like trying to think of something clever, for Twitterverse and all of that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's definitely
Do you mean
the
Clever.
title-wise
We
and
do
all
not
that?
need no clever.
Since we're short on time, I didn't do anything clever.
Kitten, get out of there.
No, put him on the show.
Well, what I was worried about is him climbing back to where the wires are. I could be off the show myself.
Feel like that would be funny.
Well, evil kitten monster. He found my pipe cleaners and decided to scatter them across the living room floor this morning.
Oh, you still doing that evil habit?
Not often, but it's there. I haven't bought any tobacco for 3 or 4 years.
And pipe cleaners are really useful for a lot of things.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with pipe cleaners. No. We ready yet, Leo?
In a minute.
Yeah, I think we're good. Sorry, my mic was off. I said that a second ago.
Ah,
And
okay.
yeah. All right.
Yeah, it's no
I'm
good trying to record the silence if you've got your mic off.
Through that.
Okay. Shall we do 3, 2, 1, record?
Let's go.
3, 2, 1, record. Lovely.
Right. See, I knew it.
Wunderbar.
We talk about you all the time, Tony, when you're not here, when you do this, and we're pretty positive that it goes longer than 20 seconds.
Well, that one was 28, roughly.
Well, better to have more than not enough, for sure.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Shall we do 3, 2, 1, 0?
Do
I'm
it.
zeroing in on it.
3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero. That was all over the place.
Okay.
For me, anyway.
Pardon?
I said that was all over the place for me, anyway. I may have even been maybe like a quarter second too late on that.
Well, that
I was a little
actually
late.
sounded better than usual.
We'll just never know.
You
We'll
never.
know.
It's only as accurate as your latency anyway.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
All right. Any last minute edits? I don't have. Okay. Cool. Cool. Everybody
Cool.
accounted for in the intro.
Got any people in the live stream?
Yeah.
Ooh, really? Hello. I'm lazy. I don't have all my stuff up yet.
We've got Russ Woodman.
Hey. Oh, is that what you were saying, Joe?
What was I
Joe.
saying?
Is that Russ the same Russ that you're talking about?
Oh, Russ K5TUX.
Yeah, is
probably.
that. Oh. He's doing a little try before you buy, huh?
Yeah. Are you on the live stream chat, Rob? Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see what's going on.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, good.
Okay, whenever you're ready, Leo.
Yeah, I'm doing one last edit.
Sure you are.
Electric City Nerds.
Who are those scrubs?
Right? They weren't invited on this podcast. Oh, wait.
There, finally
Those
made
are
it.
like regular nerds, but with little tiny batteries in them.
Maybe so.
Talking about little tiny batteries, I've got to go and find some because my watch needs a new battery.
We got an email one time from somebody that thought we were electricity nerds, and they were asking about some like weird part that they needed to do something, and I didn't respond to them that they had gotten the wrong people. I just figured out what they needed and sent them a link to it.
Nice. Keep up the facade, man. He's gonna email you again some other time with like a really complex question.
Yeah,
Tony, I
and-
don't know how postage is to UK, but I find the cheapest way to get decent batteries is to actually order them on eBay from China.
Oh, that's the way I do it. I've got some in the house that I bought ages ago. I've just got to find out where I put the spares.
Is it just placebo then? Like, because I typically always buy the name brand stuff because they feel heavier and I swear they last longer. Is that not a thing?
No.
It's probably not a thing.
Huh.
I have
When you're
actually,
only paying
on the little battery-powered candles that use the 3045s or 3043s, whatever they are, I get the same amount of time out of a name brand as I do out of the Chinese ones.
Actually, it is a thing, but with most applications, you don't notice. It's like, but with like high drain applications, like with a vaporizer, you don't want to use cheap batteries. You want to make sure you get the name brands and known good batteries. So there is a difference.
Yeah, I figure like the difference is not necessarily in capacity. It's like the guarantee of the certain milliamp output or something like that, right?
Well,
I can buy 100 of these batteries for like $8, and
exactly.
they're a lot cheaper.
They're ludicrous price, aren't they?
Yeah, also
Yeah.
true.
And
Right.
I do put my tester on each and every one before I use it, because every now and again there's a dead battery in there.
But for most applications, like I was saying, you wouldn't really notice the difference. It drains a couple of days earlier.
Yeah.
And quite often, if I'm buying CR2032s for that you use on motherboards and stuff, quite often there'll be name brands, and I'm still buying them at like 13 cents each equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those, I just buy whatever I can buy, whatever's the cheapest thing I can get. Because I mean, usually it's just to fix the motherboard clock issue or remembering issue.
Yeah, the one difference is they don't come in a pretty package. They just come in a tray, you know.
Yeah, it was like a yellow bubble wrap tray or bubble pop tray thing, and I got like 100 of them. So I'm still working on those from years ago.
Whenever I left Best Buy, I used my employee discount to buy like a lifetime supply of batteries.
Bo, you're going to have to put this conversation in the extras, because we haven't started yet, and we're having a really interesting conversation.
I know this right here is the content that I love, man, because it never makes it to the show, at least not properly, and it should.
So we're going to start a mintCast extras show. All the things that we cut out of the main.
You missed it last night, Boss. We were talking about recording the Saturday nights and putting them out.
Yeah, really. I mean, there's enough. I swear we banter well enough.
Well, I will be there next week. I can't guarantee the week after that, but I will be there next week.
Cool.
Right, shall we get going?
Yeah, only 7 minutes late.
11 on my clock.
Well, we're actually 49 minutes early for me, because it's only 11 minutes past 7.
That's true.
You're
welcome, Tony.
You funny folk across there have decided to put your clocks forward 2-3 weeks early.
Except in Arizona.
Yeah.
Which I think Dale is still in right now. Dale picked up a load yesterday in Calexico and is driving to somewhere in Texas. He's going to stop the night in El Paso.
Right.
All
Tell
right.
him to wave at it for me.
Through that, right? All right, ramping up. Gotta get that final throat clear in real quick. Welcome to mintCast episode 330. Welcome to mintCast episode 330.5. Livestream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. We're in the mintCast channel in IRC at irc.spotchat.org. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us on YouTube and Facebook. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram, Discord, or post directly at mintcast.org. This is Leo, and with me today is Tony Hughes.
Hi guys, I'm back.
Bo.
I'm still here.
Moss.
Miss me?
And Joe.
Not dead yet.
We're recording on Sunday, the 8th of March, 2020. First up in our wanderings, I try out LMDE. Bo keeps things to himself. Tony Hughes returns with Alt Linux adventures. Moss boogies from Budgie, and Joe tries out screen copy. That's right. I always read that one wrong. Then, our news. We have plenty of Linux Mint and LMDE news. Raspberry Pi fixes its USB, apt upgrades, and more. In security, we find out if AMD's flaws are as bad as Intel's. In our innard section, we cover disks, partitioning, and file systems. And finally, our listener feedback and a few suggestions. This past fortnight, I've been messing around with LMDE4. The beta dropped, which we'll cover in the news here in a little bit, a little while ago, and it's exactly what you expect. It is Linux Mint Cinnamon on top of a Debian base. So that comes with all the caveats and asterisks and all that kind of fun stuff that you might expect, like no PPAs and whatever. But it runs very well. The thing that I guess would be the deal breaker for me is that it runs on kernel 4.19. But this is a deal breaker only for me on the desktop. I'm not very familiar with the way that Debian deals with kernels, so I didn't dive in and try to just upgrade the thing like as soon as I possibly could. So I've just been poking around on it, making sure that everything else besides some of my newer hardware actually works. Now, this would probably work fine on my laptop. Since my laptop was running fine on 4.15 right when, I guess, Linux Mint Cinnamon came out, it was running on 4.15. And 4.19 is what we got. Oh, no, we never got that on the Ubuntu side. It was 4.18. And both of those kernels treated my laptop pretty nicely. So if it ever came down to it, and if I needed to reinstall, and if I could get by with no PPAs whatsoever, LMDE would probably be a really nice stable base that wouldn't change for a very, very long time, and I'd be fine with it. The biggest reason for that is Flatpak support, and it's pretty trivial to install Snap support as well, and obviously app images run just about everywhere. So with those three things combined, I think I would probably be able to get along just fine.
Well, I just have to say it's about time that we got Linux Mint running on an LTS kernel.
That's the deal. That's what Debian does. They tend to stick to the LTS kernel, don't they?
Not really. They use whatever kernel is out when they release it. In this case, though, they picked the 4.19 LTS kernel. The next LTS is 5.5.
Wow, so you're telling me that Debian and Ubuntu, the stars aligned so well for both of those groups that they both ended up on an LTS kernel. Not the same one. I guess that means Debian's on 4.19 and Debian Buster is on 4.19 and Ubuntu 20.04 is going to be on 5.4. And both of those are going to be LTS kernels. Huh.
That's right. And yes, I misspoke a moment ago. It is 5.4.
Oh, yeah. So just the stars aligned. Huh. How nice. Well, that's cool. Long-term support kernels make a whole lot less work for the people that actually maintain this stuff and do all those backports. Less work is always good.
And while you can't add PPAs to it, this time Debian Buster includes Grub Customizer in the repo.
Yay! And someone had mentioned in Telegram, I think, that you can install PPAs on it, but I would really be wary of doing that, mostly because PPAs kind of assume that you're using Ubuntu, and if versions of libraries are not the same on Debian as they are on Ubuntu, you might run into some weird incompatibility issues. apt will probably yell at you saying that you've requested an impossible situation or something like that. So if you're going to do PPAs on Debian, be very careful, and don't blame the Linux Mint or Debian guys for that. That's not really who's responsible for all of this.
I'm curious, Leo, what things are not available via App Image, Snap, or Flatpak?
You know, I was installing a bunch of... I like to install VS Code from PPA. Let me tell you why. Before the pitchforks come out. VS Code is a very lightweight program. It launches, now, forgive me here, on Windows pretty instantly. If you launch it on Linux via a PPA, it is also instant launch. I did not install it via Flatpak because, and it does exist for Flatpak, but because the Microsoft developers that are putting the Snap together recommend the Snap. So it's either PPA or Snap for me. And I mean, honestly, PPA is just as bad as Flatpak, to be honest with you, in this case, because it's not the main devs that are putting it out there. But if you launch VS Code via the Snap, you get that 2-second, 3-second wait that just makes your computer feel slow. It's just a perception thing. It has nothing to do with how the software runs or anything like that. The software runs fine. It's just that startup issue, and it just really grinds at me. So for things that I have to get on Snap, if they're available over PPA, I'll try to do it that way. But if I'm up against a wall I'll just install it via Snap. So it's really not that big of a deal. It's definitely not a game breaker or a deal breaker for me or anything like that. It just those little annoyance things that we'll talk about Linux Mint fixing a lot of those as well as we go forward. But yeah, I don't think it's a necessity for PPAs because honestly, I can't think of anything. Well, actually, no, I can. Uku, UKUU, but that wouldn't work in Debian anyway because it's the Ubuntu kernel updater and not the Debian kernel updater. But I imagine there's something similar that would probably be available in the PPA or some other kind of extra repository out there.
Yeah, whatever you were looking for, you just have to make sure they have a Debian source for the source.list file in Debian.
Yeah, so it's the more manual way to deal with that stuff, which is not necessarily a bad thing at all. I'm perfectly fine with that.
But I'm wondering, so who do you think the use case for LMDE is for?
You know, to be honest with you, if you're not happy with the way that Ubuntu does stuff, that's pretty much it. But you also want a stable base for the next gajillion years because, Debian.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's more of a proof of concept that Linux Mint could exist outside the Ubuntu world, but that, 99% of all Linux Mint users use the standard.
Yeah, I would venture a guess that is true as well. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe you just really like Cinnamon. You want the newest, latest, and greatest. A few tweaks, but you just love yourself a Debian base. I think that is squarely who they're trying to target there. Outside of the whole, hey, look, guys, we don't need Ubuntu to survive kind of vibe that you get off of that thing. But I know you're right on that. That is the main reason for its existence. Because I remember Clem wrote about it a while back, and that's what he said. It's if Ubuntu ever goes away or they ever do something that
if Microsoft buys Canonical.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's a contingency plan for something like that. But it also throws a bone to people that like Debian as well. So it's kind of nice.
It kind of scratches that same itch, like things
Debian
like
has its
Linux
own
from scratch. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, me too.
It kind of scratches that same itch as like if you want just like a more pure Debian based Cinnamon desktop, then this would be the only way to get that. If you were just trying to keep it just as Debian vanilla as possible, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a bunch of Cinnamon stuff, tweaks and whatnot that that Linux Mint does that kind of breaks the paradigm of free, and everything is free, and make sure it's all free, like all free and always kind of thing.
Well, I was just hearing that the head of the Debian project, who just got elected just a few months ago, is not going to run for another term at the end of the year. And apparently he was trying to bring the people together, and instead he's stratified them further.
Oh no, that's not good.
So we don't know who we're getting after this. So Debian may not be as stable as Canonical.
I don't know. I feel like the spirit of Debian will never die. I mean, it's always been a great distribution, but then again, times change. So we'll keep an eye on that one. I'm curious about it.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing I've got this fortnight is I never knew dropping a beer can on your hand would hurt so bad for so long. I'm on day 3 and I still can't. It's my right hand thumb, and
You're supposed to drink the beer before you drop it on your hand.
Okay, all right. This is a dumb story. I should not have done this. So, my wife has a hatchback. I went to the store and I bought some beer. And I got regular, like some tall boys, right? And so I open up the hatch and I hear some stuff falling out, and I'm like, oh no! So I'm gonna put my hands there and stop it. And it's like a 2-tier thing. Well, one of these 24-ounce cans just come barreling out of it and right where the nail meets the skin, right on my thumb. And oh man, it's got to be some of it. Was just horrible. It was horrible. It felt horrible. I had to walk in circles for like a whole minute, doing that whole thing.
This is a freak accident.
Yeah. I thought everything was done falling, and I was wrong. But yeah,
the hazards of alcohol.
I guess so. I hadn't even touched the stuff yet. Just bad choices. Anyway, Bo, you're taking a pass this time?
Oh, yeah. I had kind of a boring week.
Well, that happens to us all. So then I will throw it down to Tony Hughes. What have you been up to?
Well, first off, I remembered to switch my mic back on.
Hey, better
It
than
helps. Good to be back. Since the last show, I've been up to loads of non-Linuxy geeky stuff. I've been baking sourdough bread. For those in the know, I've been doing it a few times a week because a friend at the Lug gave me a sourdough starter a few weeks ago. So I've got into making that. Beautiful bread. The flavour's amazing. It's great. I've also been playing around with my model cars a little bit, but a short break away down south to go and visit some friends and relatives, and then a 4-day trip to Birmingham last week have kind of got in the way a little bit, as they have with Linux. But I have managed to install Alt Linux for the upcoming distro hoppers. We'll be recording next week. It was delayed from last Thursday because I ended up having to have emergency root canal work done at the dentist last week, the day before we were supposed to record, and I wasn't in the exact mood for chatting over the airwaves for nearly an hour. So me and Moss decided to postpone it until next week. But so far, even though with the vacations and being away and everything else that's going on with me, health and stuff, I've not really had as much as, a play with it as I'd have liked. But there are one or two things that I've noticed about it that I'll be reporting on Thursday. There's a really weird one, just to start off with. I've got it installed on one of my Dell machines, and when I switch it on, if I leave it and don't touch the machine, it hangs after doing the initial boot up. It hangs. As soon as I put my finger on the trackpad, up pops the desktop, and you suddenly see the little cursor moving around, and then the desktop pops up. But if I leave it, I can leave it for 2 or 3 minutes and nothing happens. Which is a real weird one. I don't know where that comes from.
They installed the Netflix "Are You Still There" option. See, you can't just let it boot up by itself. It needs a little bit of tender loving care to fully boot up.
I didn't notice it do that when I installed it into VirtualBox though. It seemed to just boot up when it was in VirtualBox. I don't know whether VirtualBox sends its own signals or whatever. But yeah, it booted up okay in VirtualBox. But yeah, so far it's the only thing I will say is beware. It's a Russian distribution, so if you're paranoid, don't use it.
And I couldn't even get you to try Calculate Linux.
I know, but I haven't got any excuses for not having the time, but I seem to be juggling loads and loads of things with lots of stuff going on, and unlike everyone else on here, I can't even blame school or work because I don't do either. But yeah, life's a bit full at the moment. So if no one else has got a comment, I'll pass over to Moss, who's got loads of things to talk about.
Who, me? I talk? Oh,
No.
Okay. Sorry to miss the last show. Things got out of control around here. Still are a bit. But in the interim, I managed to install OpenMandriva LX 4.1 on both machines and ran into a snag on installing Solus on my Galago Pro 2. I topped off my current lineup with Zorin OS Ultimate 15.2, although I'm not satisfied with that choice. It does have a nice grub menu, though. And then I messed everything else up by trying Ubuntu Budgie 20.04 in advance, with no grub menu customization at all and a few paper cuts. And I'll get into that some other time, like maybe on Distro Hoppers Digest, which, as Tony stated, we will be recording episode 11 on Thursday, March 12th. Our schedule is slipping a bit more from our intended monthly podcast, but we're only human. Our stats are still hovering at just over 400 downloads per episode, although episode 8 is the most recent to top 400 downloads. This month, as Tony said, we're covering Alt Linux, and I'm taking on Ubuntu Budgie. Speaking of the Ubuntu Budgie and my presence on their team, I ran into the same problem as I do all too often here. Not enough time and too stressed. I resigned this morning from the project, but said I was still interested in doing the voiceover videos that they asked me about. Sad to take on a new project and find out I don't have what I need to be doing it. Listener Dale Miracle upped my game again, buying me a Wavelink ST336A USB 3 dual hard drive thingy, what Leo and I call a toaster, with extra USB and SD card slots, and an Anker 9-port USB 3 hub. So now everything on my machine except for my mini keyboards and microphone are USB 3. I have replaced my underutilized 2 terabyte spinning disk with 2 of those 256 gig SSDs that I got for Yule, which run cooler and more quietly. I'll keep the 2 terabyte around as my second backup.
Ooh, so this Wavelink thing has SD card slots? Like, does it have the micro SD card
It's
slots?
got 1 regular and 1 micro.
Wow. Okay, so I'm kind of jealous because, jealous in a way because I like having all of my little plugs and everything in one spot. But I will say I did get a another micro SD card here lately. It's a G.Skill one. I bought it because the SD card adapter was neon green, and I love that color. But it also came with a USB OTG something. So you slide the little SD card into a USB plug, essentially, and just pop it right into any computer. So even if you don't have an SD card reader, it's a portable little thing you can keep on your keychain or something. That was the real reason I bought it. But
and this one also has
nice.
two regular USB 3 ports, also has 2 USB charging only ports.
Nice. And does that the Anker 9 port, is that powered or not powered?
It is powered, and it's a 9 port, but 6 ports are actual USB ports and the others are charging ports.
Oh, that's cool though. That's one of the things that I hate about charging phones or whatever on a computer is that it takes up a USB, and I only have like, I don't know. Okay, so I have like 8,
plus the
but
fact
still.
you plug your phone into your computer and it doesn't know whether you're doing that to charge it or to transfer data.
Yeah, I think my computer always assumes it's doing both, so it's just like, here, I have all these files, and I'm like, wait, no.
Well, it's a cool little thing, and I've put pictures on our Telegram group and Discord group. And while I don't have as much storage on it, I have adequate storage for my needs, since I don't have a 2 terabyte SSD running around here.
Who does?
I wish, yeah.
Yeah, well, 2 256s handle all my data with room to spare. Okay, Suzanne and I just finished Full Moon, the second Dresden Files book, and have launched into Book 3, Grave Peril. Seems to be jumping around a bit in the first few chapters, like there's more flashbacks upon flashbacks and jump over here and jump ahead for a chapter and then back a chapter, but we're trying to hang on and get the hang of it.
What'd you think of Full Moon?
We liked it. I don't like the fact that they wound up having to kill the Loop Guru, but
yeah,
it was probably better for the Loop Guru that he was dead.
He seemed to appreciate it.
Yeah. I continue working in the wrong job with no good end in sight and alternatives looking more meager. I tried to do the Postmates thing and it just isn't up to what I'm earning at O'Reilly, but for the next week, we seem to be short-handed at work, and they've turned one of the drivers into a counter person, and the other 2, we part-timers, are all of a sudden working full-time. And so that's going to mess with other things, but it's going to look good in the bank account for a while. So, Joe, you're reading some stuff. Tell me about it.
Well, mostly I'm rereading stuff. I haven't found anything new in a while, and I'm still on the lookout for new stuff. So this last 2 weeks, I finished re-listening to the Stormlight Archive Book 3, and that was actually the graphic audio version, so full cast audio drama. Just really well done. And then I read Artemis by Andy Weir, the guy that wrote The Martian. Another really good book. I also reread the Junkyard Druid series. It's mostly for, I think, younger listeners, not like kids or anything, but it's a young adult. And I re-listened to the whole series since the books are extremely short. And I was also able to pick up the 2 newest books as well. So I think that puts me at like book 9. And yeah, it is a good series. I do recommend it. And then I re-listened to the Takashi Kovacs novels because Altered Carbon Season 2 came out. And then right now I'm listening to Neil Gaiman's American Gods.
The show is amazing on that one.
What, American Gods? I thought Season 1 was good, but I was struggling through Season 2. And I don't know if Season 3 is out yet. Or are you talking Altered Carbon?
No. The you're right. American Gods. It was pretty good. I think I've gotten through the second season. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure I have, and I don't know about the third season either.
Yeah, I'm partway through second season, so I will finish it one of these days. And I have talked about this on a couple of other shows, so I'm just going to be brief on this part. I put my 3D printer back together, and I have a spare board for it now because the issue wasn't what I thought it was. I did the MOSFET fix, but I'm still having a problem with prints. For now, I'm just going to say it still isn't working, and I have more things to do to get it up and running, but I'm going to take a break from it. And
when you get it working, Joe,
uh
did you see the plans for that PiNAS?
Yeah, I've looked at that a couple of times to see about
Oh,
printing
man.
it, but I want to get a couple of good prints in before I try something like that, and then I think I have to buy a couple more adapters to get everything working on that particular build.
Well, if you ever do get it working well enough to do that, let me know what you want for one, because that looks cool.
Yeah, well, I'm also thinking about just while I'm fixing this one, if I can come up with like the $160 it would cost to get one of the monoprice minis, I'll start printing, and that'll give me more time and freedom to fix the other one. And then hopefully, by the time the mini goes down, the other one will be working again. I did watch Altered Carbon Season 2. It was good, but it was extremely different from the second book, and I really enjoyed how the first season really matched the first book really well. I do kind of understand why it would have been really, really hard to do everything in the book in a television format, just because of, there was a lot of time spent in space, a lot more explosions, and just things like that. And really, this second season felt a lot more like they were pulling from the third book, even though it was very different from that as well. And I will say before you watch it, it is a very adult-themed TV show. And I installed Fedora Workstation on that 7140 tablet that I have. It looks good, it works well, some small exceptions. I haven't used GNOME in a long time, and I'm really impressed with how far it has come along and how smooth it runs, and no more eating up all the hardware in the background. So I recommend it for a tablet. And the only problem I'm having so far is the touchpad works at the login screen but becomes unresponsive after login. I found a workaround for it, which is to use ModProbe to dump the drivers and bring them back in. And I set it up for cron tab at reboot, and that works. And I'm but it doesn't work when you undock the keyboard and redock the keyboard. I've tried it using the what is it, whenever you connect something by USB method to also reload the drivers, but that's not working. So I have to manually go reload the drivers to get the touchpad to work if I disconnect and reconnect. Also having trouble with audio. I thought I had it fixed at first. I mean, it worked. I had to go into also Mixer and disable the HDMI audio, and then the built-in speakers worked just fine. It was working, and then randomly the drivers would no longer load. But I had noticed that even when I had the speakers muted, that I was getting a popping sound every now and again from the speakers. And it is concerning. So I don't know, maybe it's a hardware issue now. I'll have to load up a live CD and find out. But Bluetooth audio works just fine. So I can use that if nothing else. And then I've been testing out Screen Copy, and that's SCRCPY, which allows me to mirror and interact with my Android phone on my Linux machine. It's free, does not require root, works using ADB, but you do have to turn on debugging on the phone, and I highly recommend it. It looks great. It works well. I've been using it quite a lot on my gaming machine. Try it out. See if you like it or not. And then I spent about 6 or 7 hours yesterday soldering headphones. I got another set of HBS 770s, set of 10, and I got most of those working. And I got all the parts in for the MMCX modular builds that I was going to do with the headphones, and I've got 5 out of the 6 that I'm doing with that set up and ready to go. So just one more set to do. And they sound better. The cables are a little bit thicker, so I'm hoping that they won't break as easily as the OEM ones do. Also, the homemade Bluetooth adapter that I had made previously, and then my son broke. I went back in and fixed that. I think I'm going to make a couple more changes to it. I was able to get the 3.5 millimeter jack in a bit further, so it's not quite flat, but it is much smaller profile. But I am still having a problem with the microphone sounding dim. And now I think I wired something a little wrong because there's no isolation between the left and the right side. But I was able to get rid of the echo that would happen where the person on the other end of the call would speak and they would hear themselves. And that's all I've really been up to lately.
I wanted to step back just a sec and talk about that screen copy thing. The only thing I have to really add to that is I was reading through the guy's README on GitHub, and at the very end, I forget what he likened it to. He had made a comparison to something else, but
Pfizer.
Is that what it is? Because no.
AirDroid?
The name itself.
Oh.
At the bottom, it just made me laugh because he said that he was trying to make a name for this project that was unpronounceable. He did that on purpose, and it was in the vein of some other project that had done it. And the other project was much worse. I have to see what that was, but it's at the bottom of his README on the thing. But it looks like a really cool project because it supports everything. Supports all the operating systems. It looks like.
Yeah.
And this is to screen share your phone's OS as a window on your laptop.
Yeah.
Yes. I was previously using Visor, which works through Chrome, to do essentially the same thing, except they cut out a lot of functionality and limit your screen resolution unless you throw money at them. So I went and found this free alternative.
Well, I'll tell you a problem that I ran into recently, and I did find a solution for it, but maybe, Joe, you might have a better one. I needed, in order to do board games on my other podcasts is Livestream. I wanted to have a high resolution camera that I could point down at the table, and the webcams I have just they just can't do
They
that. I
suck.
mean, yeah, they suck. So I was going to use my phone's camera, and it looks great if I'm recording video and then I sync it up later. But for the live stream, I used a program called IP Webcam to basically use my phone's camera as a webcam via my web browser.
I used to use IP webcam quite a bit.
The downside of it, though, is there's like a latency issue because it's going over my network. So it would be really nice if I had a way to do it via USB. I don't know if anybody listening or if you, Joe, have any options.
Well, if you could do a screen record while using screen copy, that would work fine. There's minimal latency. Well, I didn't notice any latency.
So if I were to, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down here, Joe. So if I were to record the video, even though there would be a latency on the live stream, I could then sync up the audio with like a clap track or something later. So I could still record my audio from my laptop, which would be higher quality than from my phone.
Well, it also depends on what phone you have, because like the Note 10, you could get a USB-C hub and hook up the exact same microphone that you would use for podcasting to it.
Oh, well, that would be the solution then. All right, I got to look into that more.
All right, and to close the loop on that point I was trying to make about the whole unreadable thing. So he's referencing another software that he himself made. So this guy is Geny Mobile on or Geny maybe GENY on GitHub.
Geny.
Okay, so then he also makes this other program called GNIREHTET. Gniratet? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so he says, a colleague challenged me to find a name as unpronounceable as Gniratet, and he came up with stir copy. So, yeah. I'm sorry, screen copy. So, anyway, I just thought it was hilarious that he's really going for these names that you can't pronounce. So, I don't know
But
what
which
that's
do
going to
you
do
think
for
is
him.
harder to pronounce?
The Gniratet, whatever this one was. Yeah, Gniratet.
Yeah,
there is no pronunciation for that.
I don't think he topped it. I think the first name was harder. Yeah.
Yeah. Skr copy I can actually pronounce. I feel like, and that when you know what skr and copy or CPY actually stand for, you can pronounce it. But
he just looked up German words,
right? He didn't say anything. He doesn't say what Gniratet stands for. But anyway, it's a reverse tethering thing for Android. So instead of an Android device giving your laptop Wi-Fi access or something like that to tether with, or to plug it in and give yourself internet access, it's the reverse. So if your laptop has internet, this will give your Android device internet over USB. So, interesting little projects this guy has. Anyway, well, that'll do it for our wandering, so let's head down to the news. So we're mostly light on news this time around, and we're looking at a release of LMDE4. So this is a beta. So this is what I was referencing at the top of the show with my whole wanderings thing. And on February 25th, LMDE4 Debbie beta was released. And this is just kind of the starting of a shift of the group looking into LMDE, making it as good as it can be, before they have to reshift their focus back to Linux Mint again for the release of 2004, which we'll probably see a month or two after 2004's release. So I would assume June-ish or so. And it looks like, for the most part, and through my experience, looking pretty good. There are a couple issues, though. One of them being that root is not available in the recovery mode. So if you blow something up, root will not be available until you set a password with a command that we were talking about last episode, which was passwd. So once you get LMD started up, make sure you set a root password with the passwd command. And yeah, just make sure that you can save yourself in case you ruin something. And this is a beta, so Not saying that it will blow up, but it's a beta, so it probably is a little more likely to blow up than a stable release.
It could.
Yeah, it happens. There are some sound issues that Clem recommends installing Pavu Control, so PAVUCONTROL. So if you're having some sound issues, it's not working through the interface or something like that, then just install Pavu Control and you'll get more fine-grained control through that application.
I now have the ISO. I'll be playing with it later in the week.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Please let me know. Because I feel like if I just needed a real stable system that I didn't want to mess with, like, ever, that would be perfect. I mean, Linux Mint kind of gives me that already, but, Debian.
Yeah, I reviewed LMDE 3 for Distro Hoppers last year, and that was a good bit of kit.
For sure. And an issue with VLC not detecting the DVD drive if you're trying to play DVDs or something like that. So you need to point it at dev SR0 just in case. It might be a linking issue or something like that, but just in case, dev SR0 is what you want if you need DVD playback. And some KDE apps may need some additional packages to function. So I've got those listed in the show notes. It's KDE libs bin, data, and plugins. So go take a look at those if you need them. I've got the exact package names in the show notes. But coming off of all of that news, Linux Mint monthly news came out as well for February. And it seems like they've got a focus on the overall ideas of, number one, a more vibrant color palette. They take the pink as what they're actually showing you as the difference. They have all the palettes, but in actual screenshots they have pink, and what you're looking at is a brighter pink, less of a purple. Because I kind of had the same feeling they did, where pink wasn't quite pink. It looked a little more purple than anything else. It's too close to the purple. But I'm a blue guy or an aqua guy myself, so I stick to those. And it seems like those are getting revamps as well. So yeah, I look forward to all of that when that comes down to us.
Leo just revealed that he is Aquaman.
Yeah, hey, yeah. Sounds good.
It's Aqua Guy, Aquaman's cousin.
There you go. I'll take Aqua Guy. Yeah, the less useful cousin.
You can only talk to crustaceans.
Oh, see, that's it, right? See, and I have a couple shrimp in a tank back here, and that makes perfect sense. And the other bit, which is really interesting, is they are working on a new application, temporarily called Warpinator. I honestly feel like they should keep that name. But anyway, Warpinator is an application that allows simple file sharing between two Linux Mint machines. Or eventually, if Warpinator gets adopted by some other distributions, it'll just mean that two Linux distributions with Warpinator installed will be able to share files back and forth.
Beam me over.
Yeah, seriously, it's going to be that simple. I don't know how much experience you guys have with Windows, but if you pop it on and you basically expose all of the Windows craziness out to the world, it will do this for you as well, but with a little bit more work. So it looks like to me that anybody that's running Warpinator will show up on a local area list in the Warpinator application, and then you click on them, you choose the file you want to send, and that's it. So yeah. It's really going to be that simple.
Well, Windows 8.0 actually had some nice things where you could access all of your hard drives on all of your machines.
Yeah.
As long as they were turned on. So you could just, pick a machine and then pick a file and dump it over there. But there were major security flaws with that, so that was the first thing they got rid of when they switched to 8.1.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that Warpinator is not going to be on and listening by default. You have to actually go on and click it. But the real vibe that I'm getting from this thing is I don't know how many of you guys ever played with an iPhone and played with AirDrop. Anybody brave enough to say you've done that? Well, let me tell you.
You lost me at iPhone.
Yeah, well, let me seriously. There's one feature of the iPhones that I can't get over, and it's that. It is if you are on if you are physically close, someone is in your contacts, all you got to do is pick a file, click share, click airdrop, and then pick the name, right? And then on that other person's phone, it pops up, hey, this person wants to share this file with you. Do you want to accept it or not? It is dead easy to move files from place to place. No extra stuff. This is what Warpinator seems like to me. It is if two people have Warpinator on and running, you find them in a list, you pick the file, you click send, and the other person clicks accept. And it's going to be, it seems like it's shaping up to be that simple. And if that is the case, I'm telling you, airdrop is a killer feature. It doesn't sell me overall, but airdrop is a killer feature. And if Warpinator does what airdrop does, this is going to be fantastic. See, this is why we needed Josh on the show today, so he could back me up on this.
It sounds cool. I like the name. I hope they stick with the name. That's all I care about.
Yeah, I really feel like Warpinator's kind of cool, but I mean, yeah,
It's a cool name, but it's not very descriptive of what it's doing.
It's called
very true.
Transwarp.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll come up with something good and descriptive. Yeah, I feel like airdrop is pretty descriptive as to what it does. So yeah, Warpinator hopefully gets a very descriptive name, so it can be popular and get into all the different distributions. That would be fantastic. Well, a couple of bits of Raspberry Pi news, and that first little bit is, hooray! USB-C has finally been fixed on the Raspberry Pi.
Well, a note about that. They did fix it, but they kind of did it silently, and they've released it. But if you were to go into the store like right now and buy one, you wouldn't know whether or not it had the fix or not until you brought it home and tested it.
Yeah, so the thing about that, and I ended up with a really old version of the Pi Zero W for this exact reason, right? Like, you kind of just assume that they're all the same, but they're not. And on the board itself, there's a revision number. That's what you get to look at before you plug it in, before you do all that. But you got to take it out of the box. So, I mean, you look at that revision number, and that revision number will tell you whether or not you are fixed. Now, the thing about this, I say that, I don't know what the revision number is for the USB-C power fix. But Joe, do you know much about that? This is a hardware thing, right?
Yeah, it actually is. And if you do get an older one, you can look up online. There's a way that you can solder in a chip or something that will provide the same fix.
Cool. And I mean, the other the most simple fix to this is just use the Raspberry Pi power supplies. I mean, pick one of those up with your Raspberry Pi. You will never run into any issues. It was the smart ones, right, that detected what kind of device it was and how much juice it needed and all of these other things that had to be negotiated before power was given. That was what that's what's fixed in this newest revision of the hardware. So I mean, this issue probably didn't affect a whole lot of people unless you were just grabbing a random USB-C power out of a box, and that random USB-C power also had the smart chip in it, and then just negotiated wrong. So there's a good chance
if you had a good cable as opposed to a cheap cable.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So if you buy one off of, if you order one online from the Raspberry Pi website, are you likely to get the new version of the board?
I'm going to say that they're probably going to do it the same way that Micro Center would do it, in which they're going to grab one off the shelf
first.
They're going to sell the stock out, and then
Right.
so you're not going to know what you got until it got home, and then you opened it.
You can't order directly from Raspberry Pi. They would send you to a reseller, which would most likely be Element 14.
Gotcha.
Yeah, if you order off their website,
Mm-hmm.
I think they fulfill the order, but they're actually just passing it on to one of the resellers, either
Just for the
Elements
heck
or
of it,
Farnham.
I wanted to point out that this is the Raspberry Pi 4.
Right.
It doesn't say that anywhere here.
You're right. Thanks, Moss.
Only the 4 has the USB-C problem, and therefore only the 4 has the fix, but still.
Yeah, I think I had it in my mind that none of the other Pis had C, so I didn't even have to say it. And then, yeah, no, you're right. It's best to throw it out there. And the other little bit on this is that the 1 gigabyte version is $35. The 2 gigabyte version is now also $35. And
Yeah,
the
but they are actually stopping production of the 1 gig as well.
Oh, is that true? Oh.
Yeah. So there are still a few 1 gig ones knocking about, but you'll probably find them at cut down prices.
I heard them say on another show that they were still going to be making those for industrial use, but they're still recommending that the industrial users get the 2 gigabyte anyhow.
Yeah, because, I mean, at the same price, it's obviously about the same to manufacture them. So I would imagine, why have 3 SKUs when you don't need 3 SKUs? Just have 2 SKUs. So, I mean, for the Raspberry Pi guys, it would be way easier to just deal with 2.
Yeah.
Well, they blamed the price change on the lower cost of RAM, but they didn't lower the price on the 4 gig.
Not
well,
yet.
yeah, true. I wonder if we'll see a $45 or a $50 4 gig.
I think we may. I think this may be in preparation. There may be an 8 gig coming upstream.
Don't
Chris
you
Fisher
dare.
has been predicting that one for a year.
Yeah, well, I think this might be in preparation for that. So there might still be 3 by the end of the year, a 2, a 4, and an 8. So when
Tony.
they bring the 8 out, they'll probably be aiming
March
at...
14th is next week, so
Tony, don't you dare get me excited about an 8 gig. Don't you dare. Because
No,
this right
Just
here,
in time for Pi Day.
this
I
right
think
here
it
is
could happen. Don't quote me on it, but I think it could happen.
all I'm saying is this is how I'd spend all of my money. This is it.
We end up getting an 8
$65.
gig, then it's definitely desktop replacement territory.
well, the 4
Oh.
gig is okay, other than some software issues.
Don't
The
forget
only
your
problem
fan.
is, will they be able
Yeah.
to cool it enough? That's the only other issue.
Well, any type of active cooling really just does the job.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not keeping that thing at 100% for long amounts of time, I imagine you'll be just fine. But yeah, at least passive cooling. But yeah, active cooling would probably be best.
A 20 Pi 4 super computer with liquid cooling. Yeah.
So this is what I'm talking about, right? Like I want to get like a cluster of pies going, but I always have this hodgepodge of pies. I don't have more than one of any single pie.
Right.
So
I've actually
man,
been looking for like used Pi 3Bs, either the pluses or just the 3Bs, the one without the Wi-Fi built in, and I don't see people selling them. I mean, on eBay, your lowest cost 3B plus is $43.99 right now, and your lowest cost 3B is $41.99.
To which I have to say thank you, Tony.
So why wouldn't I just walk into the store and buy one at that price?
yeah,
Yeah,
very
you're
much
better
so.
off buying a Raspberry Pi 4 2 gig at $10 cheaper.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Well, the 3s I want because there are just more projects that you can do with the 3s right now based on just the data that's already out there. So I don't need a 4 gigabyte 4 for a lot of the stuff that I want to try and do.
Right. But it's amazing how far we've come in 8 years. The first Raspberry Pi had 256 mega RAM, and obviously a lot worse processor. I think they reckon it's 10 times more powerful now with the 2 gig one than the original one.
That seems likely. I mean, the first one was fun to do small projects with, but trying to set up a desktop on it was...
Oh, it was painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And trying to stream a YouTube video was even more painful.
Yeah.
All right, and next up, Apt 2.0 is released. Who's taking this one?
I've got the article open. They decided not to come out with 1.10. They thought that'd just be boring. So here we come, apt 2.0. Highlighted changes since 1.8. New features, commands accepting package names now accept aptitude style patterns. The syntax of patterns is mostly a subset of aptitude. See apt-patterns (7) for more details. Apt 8 now waits for DPKG locks indefinitely when connected to a TTY, over 120 seconds otherwise. When apt cannot acquire the lock, it prints the name and PID of the process that currently holds the lock. A new satisfy command has been added to apt 8 and apt get 8. Pins can now be specified by source package by prepending src: to the name of the package. And there's stuff on the page on that. We have the link in the show notes. Performance now uses libgcrypt for hashing instead of embedded reference implementations of MDS, SHA-1, and SHA-2 hash families. Distribution of RRED and decompression work during update has been improved to take into account the backlog instead of randomly assigning a worker, which should yield higher parallelization. Incompatibilities. The apt8 command no longer accepts regular expressions or wildcards as package arguments. Use patterns. See new features.
Oh no!
Hardening. Credentials specified in the auth.conf now only apply to HTTPS sources, preventing malicious actors from reading credentials after they redirected users from an HTTP source to an HTTP URL matching the credentials in auth.conf. Another protocol can be specified. See apt_auth.conf (5) for the syntax. There's a bunch of developer changes. There's Python-apt 2.0. It's not ready. They're hoping to add a new cleaner API for cache access before making the jump from 1.9 to 2.0 versioning. And libept 1.2. I don't know what I'm talking about, Leo. If you do, go ahead.
Well, so the couple of high view takeaways from this is that apt is going to be a little bit smarter now, because it sounds like right now if you do apt, it's like, hey, it's locked. You can't do anything with apt right now. But now it seems like it's going to actually give you some information about the process ID that is actually locking this thing, so that maybe you can actually go and investigate a little bit more. As far as the incompatibilities thing, I use the wildcard thing all the time. I use that to check, if I were to install Cockpit or something like that, there are a bunch of different plugins for Cockpit that you also install through apt as well. And the easiest way for me, at least in my old Unix brain, to find out which packages of Cockpit I have is to do an apt search Cockpit star. And that would just list off all of the packages of Cockpit in the apt repository, and it would then tell me which ones I have installed. So if I noticed one wasn't installed that I wanted, I could go in and install that. So that's okay. It's just going to be something you're just going to have to know how to do that the new way.
Yep, you've got to use patterns at this point. It's a new feature.
And I'm happy with that, but I guarantee you it's going to take me about a year to remember to stop using the star on newer versions of apt. Now, the interesting question about this is apt 2.0 going to make it into Ubuntu 20.04 and subsequently LM20? That is yet to be determined, but I would imagine,
see.
Yeah, imagine it might be a little too late because we're about a month away from the release, and I don't remember when the feature freeze was, and it may have already happened, so we'll see. The other thing that I noticed on that was the HTTPS handover thing. So the good thing to know is that apt is getting more secure. There was a lot of hullabaloo a few months ago about the way that apt can be taken over. Well, okay, not apt. That HTTP sources can be taken over, and you would be getting incompatible packages, or even as bad as malicious packages if you're using HTTP sources. Well, this seems like a better approach to that, and yeah, I mean, they have it under the hardening section when that's what it is. It is a bit of hardening on the way that apt deals with HTTP and HTTPS sources. So that'll be nice. That's good stuff. I'm really happy to see the security side of apt come up as well.
Everybody loves a hard apt.
Yes. Now, last thing, get your cynical hat on because it's time to introduce the 4th Microsoft member to the Linux Foundation. Of 22 members, mind you. So we're coming up to a very large percentage of Microsoft Linux Foundation members. So I need you guys
That's
to
about
tell me.
18%. That's not a large number.
That is a very large number to me on a board of people that have a vested interest in Linux. So I get it. I get why they're there. But 4?
How many canonical team members are there?
I didn't look. I don't know. Let me go see. Actually, you know what? Y'all banter about this. Tell me why I shouldn't be worried about this, and I'm gonna go find out who's on this board right now.
You shouldn't be worried about this because it's not your place.
Oh no! I don't know that that's the case at all. So let me see. We got a guy from Chris DeBona from Google. We got Chris Mason from Facebook. Chris Rice, AT&T. Daniel Parks, Samsung. David Marr, Qualcomm. David Ward, Cisco. Dirk Hondel, VMware. Eileen Evans from At Large. Let me see. Erica Bresica from At Large as well. Some of these guys don't have affiliations, it looks like. Credit Suisse. So Frank Franzilli from Credit Suisse First Boston. We've got Hiromi Wada. AVC Networks of Panasonic. Hisao Munakata. Upstream Linux Kernel Development Team. Oh, okay. Yeah. Hisao. You're my guy. Hisashi from Hitachi. Jessica Murillo from IBM. You know what I'm not seeing? I'm not seeing any canonical guys. Canonical people. Jim Zemlin, Executive Director of the Linux Foundation, obviously. Kenji Kaneshige from Fujitsu. Melissa Evershood from Intel. Nithya Ruff from Comcast. Let me see. Peijin Hao from Huawei. Sarah Novotny from Microsoft. And anyway, I gotta find the 3 others from Microsoft. But yeah, this one does make 4.
Probably those at-larges.
Yeah, probably. So yeah, so it makes 4. And I didn't hear any other company be on there more than twice. So Microsoft is the biggest group on the board. What's up with that? Tell me why I don't need to be worried about this, really. I mean,
It wouldn't do you any good to be worried about it.
Well, sure, but I mean, the more noise we make, at least we're heard about stuff like this. I mean, Microsoft hearts the Linux and all, but do they?
Aren't board places on the foundation representative of contributions? So the more money you put in, the more board representation you got.
I know that has something to do with it, but I mean, should that be the way that at least the Linux Foundation makes their decisions on how they move forward? Because they got a lot of money from Microsoft.
Well, when they get 12 places on the board, then you can be worried.
I'm going to be worried right now. I will be even more worried at 5, even more worried at 6, but
Get the tinfoil hat out.
It's been on. It's been on this whole article. I need this. I need these shenanigans to stop.
Welcome to the year of our Ford.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what to make of it.
It is just concerning. I mean, I'm not. It kind of may have come off that way, but I'm not chicken. The sky's falling and all that yet. But it is concerning to me that there are so many people with a vested interest in Microsoft on this board now. It doesn't do us any favors that in the past Linux has been attacked by Microsoft multiple times, and you know. It's just the optics of the whole thing, right? People don't forget this stuff. And then you turn around and say Microsoft hearts Linux, and then all of a sudden you're starting to take over. Now, okay, maybe not take over, right? It's only however many percentage points Moss said. But it is the biggest group on the board. So make of that what you will. I will be cynical from here on out.
It gives them more power to make sure things that they need for their infrastructure are included in the kernel, but I don't think it gives them too much power on Linux per se.
Well, right, because this is not, this is not like direct control over the kernel or anything like that. This is something totally different. But still, yeah, this can affect the general direction in which Linux moves. And I totally get that Linux needs to move in the direction that people that use Linux want it to go. And Microsoft is a big user of Linux now. So, I mean, there is a reasonable explanation for why there are so many people on the Linux board. But I tend to take the cynical road, and this is the cynical way to look at this, that Microsoft is just getting its grubby little mitts all over at least the Linux Foundation, and having a way bigger say than they've ever used to have in the past.
Time will tell.
Yeah, I really, really hope that Microsoft hearts Linux the way that they say. And if that is the case, then this will be a whole nothing burger, and no one will have to worry about anything. And that is what I hope. I really hope Microsoft is being true to their publicly stated goals about Linux in this. All right. So I think we've added to the security update since the intro. So let's head down there and hit some security.
Now that you've got us all paranoid.
Yeah, right. Let's get more paranoid. Oh yeah, let's get way more paranoid. So let's start off with the story that we were leading with, and that is AMD chips minted in 2011 up to 2019. So that's going to start with the Bulldozer chipset. So those of you running on FX series chips, yep, this is you. There are now chip vulnerabilities discovered in two different ways. So the question that we asked is if AMD worse off than Intel? And I hate it. I hate it when these news stories like go on and on and on and on and on and wait until the very end to tell you what the actual answer is. The answer is no. AMD is not worse off than Intel is in this case. AMD is these flaws, these L1D cache-way predictor flaws that they've got going on right now, and they are not as bad as the meltdown and zombie load attacks that Intel has been and is still dealing with today. So right off the bat, AMD's got some flaws. You are able to extract data out of the CPU, but that data seems to be only metadata, so data about the data. This is great for malicious actors that want to get a feel for what these CPUs are doing all the time, but this does not give those malicious attackers access to the data itself. So that is what differentiates this type of attack that we've got with AMD from the Intel attacks over the past 3 to 4 years. The Intel attacks do allow actual data exfiltration. So the bad guys get the actual data, including metadata. So they get data about the data and the data itself. On the Intel chips, with the AMD chips, it seems to be just metadata or data about the data. So it does seem, though, and this is where the difference really lies, it does seem, though, that in testing, these AMD chips can be made vulnerable remotely, and just the proof of exploit is out there right now. So it seems to me that you can leverage this attack in the real world right now. So a little bit worse, a little bit better in certain situations, but overall, I would imagine that AMD's happy that they're not having to deal with the same amount of blowback on this. But I imagine this is a pretty new article, so we'll see what happens overall. Do you guys run AMD chips?
Yeah, my server does.
Is it going to be one of the affected? So minted
Yeah.
between 11 and 19?
Pretty sure it is. It's one of the AMD FX chips.
Yeah. Yep. I've got a 6350 and that one is definitely affected. But that also includes my my Ryzen 7 1700. So yeah, luckily for me, neither of those are running server applications, and even if they were, they're not exposed to the internet. So yeah, I feel like I'm pretty fine with all of this. Is nothing going to affect me directly. I mean, certainly not as much as the Intel flaws. I mean, I'm running DigitalOcean droplets, man, and those are running on Intel, so I'm already way more exposed than this AMD flaw would allow, even if I did have web exposed stuff on AMD chips. And it doesn't help, by the way, that AMD was brushing this off. They had a controversial response that was basically like, don't worry about it. Nothing can actually be done with this. And then the researchers came back and were like, no, it's real, and you're vulnerable. It's a side channel attack, just like the Intel stuff. And they marked it as misleading. The researchers marked AMD's statement as misleading. But yeah, it looks like not as bad as Meltdown Zombie. So we're probably going to be mostly okay, but there are risks. And I mean, running anything on the internet, there will always be risk.
Right.
The next story down that we have is Let's Encrypt revokes 3 million certificates and then unrevokes about 1 million. So the interesting thing about this is that the Let's Encrypt came out and announced that they had a bug on the way that they were minting their certificates, and that would allow them to, well, that forced them to need to be revoked. So these certificates would not pass muster. Essentially, the central authority that sets the rules for certificates, it didn't pass that muster, so they were just going to have to go and revoke them. Well, turns out Let's Encrypt got with about, well, I don't know how many customers this actually affected, but it was more than half. It was 1.7 million certificates they got fixed before the deadline of the 6th, I believe is what it was. And it turns out that the remaining little over 1 million certificates are not in a grouping that they would consider vulnerable. So they are not up to muster, right? They do not pass muster, but they do not seem to be in any vulnerable state. So what Let's Encrypt is going to do, instead of revoking them, what they were going to do, they just decided they're only 3 months anyway, let's just let them die. So these certificates will be out of the pipeline in the next couple of months, so Let's Encrypt just decided to not be worried about this overall. But yeah, this is good news for people that didn't know that they were affected, that don't pay attention to Let's Encrypt, but use Let's Encrypt. But the moment this story broke, I ran to their website. They have a, I'll need to put this in the show notes, but they have a little checker. You drop your URL in there, it checks the certificate, it comes back, and it tells you whether or not your certificate is affected by this. And yeah, luckily for me, I was not. So I didn't have to do anything, but still, there were 1.3 million certificates out there that that needed to be touched somehow. And it looks like before all this came to a head, we were down to about almost exactly 1 million that are just going to, over the next 83 days, they will just expire. So that's what's going to happen with that. And lastly, this is the one that snuck in here. Intel has an unfixable chipset security flaw. What is this about? Nobody? You're just going to throw it down there and not tell me about it. All right.
Well, I'm having an audio issue right this second. I can tell you about it.
Okay, yeah, please.
Okay, now, I did skim this article. I had seen something about it the other day. Intel has an unfixable chipset security flaw. Is it a risk? Essentially, no, it's not a risk, but it is unfixable. It requires physical access because of how encryption works. Evidently, there's something built into the chipset which does encryption, and then there's also some other hardware-related stuff, hardware-specific stuff that helps with encryption. Now, the part that is with the Intel chip itself has been the same for a very long time, and that makes for a vulnerability. So if someone could get access to your machine, it's possible that they could decrypt everything that you have. So one more issue with Intel chipsets. And I probably explained that wrong. Like I said, I quick skimmed over the article to try and be able to provide something here for it.
Yeah, and yeah. So, but the funny thing about this is, I swear we can't go 2 weeks without talking about another Intel flaw. It'll never end. It'll never end. All right, well, that'll do it for our security update. I hope I thoroughly scared everybody. So instead, let's talk a little bit about disks and partitioning. So let's head down to Linux Innards. All right, so in this section, we're going to hand it off to Bo again and talk some about partitioning disks, looking a little bit into the Linux file system, how to do this. We're certainly going to focus on the commands, but as we got some feedback, I think we're going to touch on disks as well to kind of cover the other half of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking we should go over the commands first, and then afterwards we can look at disks and see how it looks with a GUI interface. Because basically on the back end, these are the tasks that it would be doing. So we can kind of do a step-by-step on the process from the command line first.
Let's
let's talk about partitioning types. So the two main partitioning types, especially those expressed on the LPIC 1 exam, would be the MBR partitions. MBR partitions are like a older style of partitioning drives. It requires a file or a section dedicated it's the first section of the hard disk, right at the center of the disk, that is used for basically it stores a table of the partitions that are going to be on the entire disk. It's the master boot record. That's what the MBR stands for. This came out like in the 80s when this was originally designed. It's been succeeded by the GPT partition tables, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So a MBR partition, it can only have 4 primary partitions. Now you may be asking yourself, well, I know that I've had more than 4 partitions on a hard drive that was, not necessarily a GPT partitioned hard drive, and that's because one of these primary partitions can be extended. They call it an extended partition, but it can be extended into more logical partitions. So you take a extended partition, and you break that up into multiple logical partitions. This is important because a Linux installation, even prior to the advent of GPT, may have needed more than 3 or 4 partitions, because a lot of people partition their pseudo file systems in a different section than their regular file systems.
Who, me?
Yeah, and Moss needs about 100 of them, so he would definitely need a GPT partition.
The one thing to remember is that a primary partition that's turned into an extended partition, each of the partitions on that have their own number, but so does the overall partition.
The primary tool to managing the partition table on a MBR partitioned hard drive used to be fdisk. Originally, that was the fdisk was only used for MBRs, but Leo, you were telling me in the last Saturday meeting that that's actually not true anymore, that fdisk can do GPT and MBR.
That's true. So yeah, I think what is it? L for help, P for help. I can't remember what fdisk the button for help is for when you're in fdisk, but when you do that, you go down to the bottom and you see that it actually lists GPT partition tables. But I'm not sure when exactly that happened, but it certainly happened by Ubuntu 18.04. So since then, at least, it's been supported.
Okay.
Well,
I've
this
got,
is completely news for me. I've never heard of a GPT partition.
yeah, it's honestly, I had always heard of MBR, and I was using GPT partitions because I was following instructions on the internet that had me doing that, but I didn't know about it until I started studying for the exam. The same with
It
FDisk. I'd used FDisk before installing Arch because they describe it that way on their installation wiki. But until I started studying for the exam, I didn't actually like learn the history of it and how it was originally for MBR and all that.
Yeah, the biggest advantage I think, or at least the one that affected me the most, was that GPT partitions can support more than 2 TB. I don't know if you actually said that before, but
No, we hadn't got to that yet. But
oh, sorry.
that's definitely true. No, go ahead. I didn't have that in my notes, so
Oh,
that's
cool.
definitely true. Also, it also
Yeah.
can do 128 definable partitions by default. I think you can actually extend it to more than that, and it doesn't use the more traditional. It doesn't use the primary extended logical method. It just makes partitions. And then there was a tool called gdisk that was made just for GPT partition tables. But I want to take a look at fdisk real quick and just kind of talk about some of the commands that you can do there. So I've got my terminal open. I've got a thumb drive plugged in just for this demo. So the way I like to look at what hard drives are on my computer right now and how they're named is I use the lsblk command. That's just the one that I'm the most comfortable with. So I can see that my thumb drive that I'm using for the example is actually SDB in this scenario. So that's something else that's kind of important to this process is whenever you add a hard drive to your machine, it goes SDA, and then the next one would be SDB and SDC, XD, so on and so forth. And then each partition would have a number. This is what Moss mentioned earlier. So SDA1 is the first partition on the SDA disk that's plugged into my computer. So my thumb drive here, it doesn't have any numbers because it's just a blank thumb drive that we're about to make a partition table on.
While he's getting that ready, I do want to. So I have an endless curiosity, and there was one time that came up that I needed to know. I didn't really need to know, but I wanted to know really, really badly. Because it works SDA, SDB, SDC, and it goes all the way up the alphabet. So the question struck me: what happens after Z? Yeah. So it turns out that it just goes AA, AB, AC, AD, and I don't know why I forced myself to learn that, but now I know it, and now I can't forget it. And yeah, I have to say it every single time this kind of conversation comes up.
How did you get all the way through that?
Disk shelves. I had two 15 disc DASs that I had directly connected to a server, and so I had 30 letters essentially. Well, 31 including the operating system disk that was in the server.
Wow, that's pretty wild.
yeah, and then I ended up RAID-Zing them all, which was really interesting as well.
Oh wow! So, in order to run fdisk on my SDB disk here, I'm going to type in sudo fdisk, and I'm running sudo because you have to have administrative privileges, and it'll be /dev because that's the default mount point, and SDB, which we talked about the /dev in my first innards, I think. So let's go ahead and enter on that. We'll see what comes up. Asking me for my password.
Always.
Bo is awesome 100.
Yeah, make sure you do a whole lot of double checking before you start messing around with partitions and make sure it's the correct drive.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what would happen if I tried to just wipe out SDA on the same drive that's running the file system that's doing the wiping, but I wouldn't want to try it and see.
It would probably do it.
It's been a lot of fun.
I would definitely. I would just. You guys would lose my connection really.
Nah, we wouldn't notice until you tried to restart.
Oh, really? You think I would run off a RAM long enough to finish the show? Maybe.
Probably, but you wouldn't have an Audacity file at the end of all of that.
Yeah, that's true. So we can hit M for menu. So when it comes up, it says "Welcome to fdisk," and then it tells you M. It just basically gives you a prompt, and the way it takes commands in this prompt is just single letters. And let's hit M so we can see some of the help, and I'll read some of them out for the podcast. So the one that we're going to be using the most probably here is N for add a new partition. You can do P for print the partition table. Another important one to understand is the W and the Q. So whenever we actually do the N and we set up a new partition table, that's actually not going to, if we just quit, it's not going to save any of that. I mean, you have to do a write before you can quit. So whatever changes you make, they'll take effect whenever you hit the W. So let's go through that. We'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and hit N for a new partition. It is asking me for the partition type, whether this is a primary or extended. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The default is primary. So if you just hit enter, it's just going to make a primary partition. Just for the sake of this example being short, I'm just going to go ahead and we'll accept that. So I'm just going to hit enter for the P. It gives you a number. You have to pick your partition number, and 1 through 4. Default is 1, so we're going to go with that. We'll go with the default. I think basically if you go through this and you just hit enter, you'll just get the defaults, and it's going to pick primary, it's going to pick the first available partition, and then it's going to pick the first available the starting location, and then the entire disk, it'll pick the last available starting location, and then it would write that as a partition table. So I think basically, if you just open this up and you just hit enter a bunch of times, it's going to make one partition across the entire device, I believe.
And for disks like what you're dealing with, that's exactly what you want.
Yeah, in this scenario, that actually is. So after you select what number partition you want, then it's going to ask you what sector do you want that partition to start on. So in this scenario, the first available sector is 2048. I'm just going to accept that. I didn't do any of that calculation. It just, it already understands that. Likewise, it sees that my last available sector is some absurdly long number, 123,903,999. Now, you could say this is let me scroll back up and see. This is a 60 gig thumb drive. So let's say I just wanted to do 10 gigs of that. I could actually just say plus 10G. Let's do that. And it took that. All right. I didn't know if it needed to be a capital G or a lowercase g. I used a lowercase g, but it may work either way. I'm not sure. So by default, it says that the partition type is Linux. The partition type, you can get a list of partition types. Let me see. How do I get that list? Okay. So if you actually in the fdisk menu, again, it just takes single letters as the way that you run commands on this. And L will list all the known partition types. It's a lowercase l. The two that we really care about is swap, which is 82, and Linux, which is 83. So yep, 82 and 83. So if whenever that pops up and it asks you your partition type, if you wanted to change it to anything other than Linux, like I said, by default it picks Linux. You would just have to come here and know the number before you got to that point. But if you're using fdisk, it assumes you want Linux, and that's a good assumption. So if I wanted to write this, I would hit W. Bada bing, bada boom, it wrote. And automatically, whoa, I didn't even have to quit. It just kicked me out after that. But it said that the partition table has been offered. So now if I do a lsblk, I can see that now SDB also has SDB1, and it is 10 gigs in size. You can also set a label. So if you do that whenever you do your file system. Whenever we set up the file system, we can also set a label so that you could say that this was home, or you could Linux Mint or whatever you wanted to label it to make it a little bit more identifiable in the lsblk list here. So the G-Disk tool, before F-Disk was capable of doing GPT partitions, you would use the G-Disk tool, which was designed to be very, very familiar based on F-Disk. Let me open. I don't even know if I've got this installed.
Before you jump ahead here, can you do a df space dash h real quick?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now that gives you something similar to LSBLK in that it will show you what the system calls it. So it'll show you the /dev/SDA, but it'll also show you the sizes and the mount points if it's mounted.
It's actually showing me. It's showing me what my system has mounted, but it's not showing me the 60 gig or the 10
Okay,
gig.
so it's not. It doesn't show the non-mounted. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beauty of LSBLK. It doesn't care what you've done with your disk. If it's on the system, it'll show you. But DF, yeah, will just show you mounted stuff. So information about your mounted resources. But the one of the things about DF and LSBLK that I can't get over is that when you have snaps, you get all those dev loops. That bugs me.
Yeah, I seem to have some snaps installed, so a whole bunch of loops.
I'm planning on doing one of these sessions on the fstab command or sftab file, and so we'll probably be using DF a lot in that one.
Oh yeah.
All right, so let me try G-Disk. I actually have not opened G-Disk.
Now their help command is a question mark. So first things first, it's gonna be a little different. But overall, I think it's very similar.
Yeah, so G-Disk comes up. It's a little bit more wordy than F-Disk, but it tells us basically it says that tells us the partition table scans. It sees MBR only on my system. It has it's found an invalid GPT and valid MBR converting. So it's got a little more details. But just like you said, M won't get you help here. Question mark gives you help, but it's really similar to F-Disk. It's just single character commands. Let's pull up the list to see what we have available. Oh, the list even seems a little more compact. No M. So why did they replace the M with the question mark if they weren't going to use the M for something else?
I don't know actually. I guess question mark is closer. It reminds me of like Cisco stuff, so maybe that was it.
But it looks like the commands are essentially the same. You have N for add new partition, P for print the partition table, W is for write, Q is also for quit. So very, very similar. I'm going to hit N to see if it looks the same. I may not go through the whole process. Let's just see if it looks the same as F-Disk. Yes, and so it actually asks us partition number 2 through 28, 2 through 128. So if we take the default, which is 2, it tells us the first available sector, and this is based on now it's 10 gigs ahead of where it was before because we're starting right after partition number 1. So we're just going to accept the default, and then the last sector we'll just let it do the rest of the hard drive. And then now here's where it wants. So this one is a little different than F-Disk. It wants the hex code or GUID for the files for the partition type. And this is where we saw Linux earlier was the default. Here it says the default is 8300. That is the that's Linux. So it's actually the same thing. But we can hit capital L if we want to see a list here. Let's see what that looks like. And it shows us the same list as before, only it has the hex version of the partition label as opposed to just a single number the way they had it on the F-Disk listing.
And it does have some partitions that I'm not And I'm kind of surprised they're here. You've got Apple TV recovery partition, Apple soft RAID status partition, and just some really interesting VMware reserved partition. So
Yeah.
this might actually be better in some ways than FDisk. I don't know if FDisk actually supports these same partitions as well as whatever they do support. This is interesting. I've never looked in here.
Now, I may be blind, but I'm looking for swap right now. Linux swap 8200. Okay.
So they kept the same numbers. They just added 100 because of the hex.
Yeah. All right. So we're just going to. Oh, we can see more codes. Goodness gracious. All right. So we're just going to accept the default 8300. All right. So then we're back to our command. It has written It has created the partition tables, but we still have to hit W to write it.
Okay. So right there. This is something that you need to know. Before, because you didn't choose an FDisk, it wrote an MBR partition table. So when you open up gdisk on that same disk, it's going to warn you, and it'll tell you found invalid GPT and valid MBR. So
it
what
did,
it's
it did tell me that. Yeah.
So what it means is that like you can only have one. So you're using gdisk, you obviously want GPT. So what I'm going to do is remove the MBR stuff, replace the MBR stuff with GPT, and move forward that way. The downside to this is you cannot non-destructively move from MBR to GPT. It basically rewrites the whole thing. They are incompatible. So if you have data on your disk already and you want to convert to GPT, back your stuff up because it won't be there when you're done.
I see. So this is a scenario you run into if you had MBR originally and then you open gdisk.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what it's asking me now. It's giving me a warning. It's saying this will override existing partitions! ! And if I hit yes on this, I realize it's going to make the partition that we just told it to make, but will I still have my first one?
It should remake that one for you, yes.
But if there was anything on it, it would be wiped, which we know there's not, but if there was.
Oh, yeah, probably, yes.
All right, so it did it. That was really good insight, by the way. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because I didn't want to say it while we were streaming, but I was wondering why it gave me that warning message when I opened gdisk.
Yeah, had you not done the FDisk stuff first, it probably would not have given you that warning in the first place.
Okay, so it did what we expected. It did SDB1 and SDB2. They both exist now, 10 gigs and 49 gigs. So now we've got partitions, but they are just partitions with a partition type. They don't have any file system on them. And so this is where if you were doing this within the GUI, which we're going to look at next, if you're doing this within the GUI, this would be part of the selection process whenever you format a partition. It would actually ask you this while it was doing it. But doing it from the command line, you have to do it with additional commands. And there are a ton of different file systems out there. And there's actually what we're about to describe here is kind of the simplest ones. There are more that are important to the exam. So if you're studying for the exam, we're not good exam study material, honestly. You should be using other material as well, but this is helping me learn for my exam. ext3 and ext4 are probably the most common, and they're kind of the legacy file systems for Linux. I think that I've used ext anytime I've ever had to choose. I've always chosen ext4 just because that's the one that I knew that I was supposed to choose. But there's also XFS and Btrfs are also the two popular ones right now. Those are kind of the main three there. ext4, Leo, we were having this discussion also yesterday, but ext3 basically, as the ext file system has gotten better, they've progressively went from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. The main feature in 4 is that it has journaling, which is also a feature that you can get on 3, but 4 has journaling by default. And then XFS is similar to ext4, but it's adopted by Red Hat. It's just another file system that is similar to it. There's also ButterFS, which is a more advanced file system. It has snapshotting, and I pulled up their website to kind of look into how it differs.
And a lot of times, ButterFS is likened to ZFS, so it's got a lot of the same features that ZFS will have.
Yeah, Joe mentioned ZFS, and I don't know if it's on the exam, but the study guide that I'm following didn't mention it.
It is not. It's not on the exam for positive, mostly because it barely just got accepted into the kernel in some ways.
Yeah,
So
it's always
I
been
have
an
a question.
addition.
Why
And
would
it's-
anyone use? Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Why would anyone use ext3 if they could use ext4? I know I've been around since ext2, but still, why not use the latest version of ext?
I think that's a really good question.
I'd imagine it's for the same reason that you don't always use, the most up-to-date software. It supports something that you do. I imagine that's pretty much everything. That the biggest reason that legacy software lives on, they don't want to recode their thing to support something new.
I've always chose ext4 because, like I said, that's just the one that I knew to do at default, and I've never really known why. That's a really good question. But ButterFS also has it incorporates RAID and LVM by default. It does snapshotting. It seems like it's just a more advanced file system whenever it comes to things like it doesn't write directly to the hard drive. I think it works in like a matter of references and labels. To be honest with you, I'm not positive on all the details of it, but I also know that it has some known scenarios for data loss. And so while it's probably the file system of the future, a lot of people are kind of not using it right now on important systems. But apparently this is what we're all going to go to one day. We'll be talking about how awesome ButterFS is.
And that's really interesting. So the guy that was behind ext3 and ext4 labeled ext4 as a stopgap. It is not. It was not really supposed to be a full-on release, but it turned out to be one. And he recommends ButterFS to move to eventually. And so you say that a lot of people are kind of staying away from ButterFS, and you're right. You're absolutely right. Except the SUSE guys. OpenSUSE installs onto ButterFS partitions by default. If you don't change it, it's ButterFS.
Wow. And I know that I think the latest versions of Red Hat and CentOS actually don't have it as an option.
Interesting.
I think they've gone the opposite route where they're not supporting it.
Yeah, so that'll definitely make big ripples. But it seems like it's available in Ubuntu anyway through MakeFS, but I don't know if it's available during install. I'd have to go and check.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that I've heard a lot of stuff on both sides, and I've never used it. And if I was using it, I wouldn't know enough about it to. It would just be a file system on my computer that I would just. It works because it's magic.
Yeah, and back your stuff up, and then you'd be fine, no matter what happens.
Yeah. I think on a home system, that makes sense. So if you were wanting to add one of these file systems to these partitions that we just made, you would use the makefs command, mkfs. So by default, the command is mkfs-t for type, and then let's say we're doing ext4. We would type ext4 and then the name of the partition that we're putting it on. So I'll go ahead and make partition 1 ext4 using this command, and then I've got another command that I'll demonstrate real quick. Just let me do it real fast, guys.
Yeah, one of the cool things about this makefs command is that you can type in makefs-t and then do a couple tabs, or makefs dot and do a couple tabs, and it'll list off all of the partitions or all of the file systems that your system can support. And at least on Linux Mint, which is the same as Ubuntu 18.04, you get BFS, Btreefs, ButterFS, Btreefs, whichever. I mean, you could say it either way. CramFS, exFAT, exFAT I added, so that's not going to be normally. ext2, 3, and 4, FAT, HFS, HFS+, JFS, Minix, MS-DOS, NTFS, RiserFS, VFAT, and XFS. So there's a lot of support in there at the beginning.
All right, so while you were talking, I actually typed it wrong, and I got an error message. And I'll tell you guys what I did wrong. I did sudo mkfs-t, and then I just typed the location that I wanted, the location of the partition. So I skipped the file system type. So
Yeah, and
it's-
so MakeFS was like, "What file type? What?"
yeah, yeah, right. It said no. It actually says no device specified, which I think is kind of an odd. But I
Oh,
guess
I
what
see.
it was trying to do. Oh, it was like, oh, well, the file system type that you want must be /dev/hdb1. So yeah, I guess if I
Yeah.
had typed the same thing twice, then it would have been like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So there's a shortcut to this command. If you type in mkfs.ext4 and then space the location of the partition, that actually is the exact same command. That's makefs-t ext4, but it's just been aliased into this one command.
Yeah, this
so
is
I'll
how
do,
I do it.
Yeah, so I'll do partition 2. I'll do it this way. And then I mean, it looks exactly like the output of the previous command. So it's wrapping up its thing now and done. So now we have 2 extended 4 file systems partitioned on this thumb drive that we just put in. So I want to show how this would look from the GUI environment, which is also, disks is actually also referenced in the study guides. I don't know how much it'll be on the exam. The exam seems to focus more on the command line. I think you just need to know that disk does exist if you wanted to use a GUI.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really important to those that I guess may not be too familiar with the command line or don't want to dive into it or something like that. Disks is a fantastic utility that the GNOME team has put together, and it ends up in Linux Mint. So if you're using Mint, you have access to disks, and we'll do all of the stuff that we've been talking about this entire time without ever having to touch the command line a single bit.
Yep. So if I look at my thumb drive now on disks, I see actually it says it's an 11 gig extended 4 partition, and I see a 53 gig extended 4 partition. So why don't we do the opposite? We should make we should show what it looks like. All right, so I'm going to delete these. So if I click on them, they've just got this handy minus button below the volumes.
Yep.
And we're going to kill it with fire. Pops up and gives us a warning. Click on delete. It is gone. So now it sees that 53 gig partition as just free space. So now I'm going to click there and let's see how we make a partition. All right. So that minus is now a plus. We use that to add. Oh, it's got this nifty slider. Holy cow. So we can actually just slide this slider to whatever size we want. Let's split it in half. All right, so 25 and 27. It's not exactly half. And
enough.
We can give it a volume name. There is a on-off switch for override existing data. There's no existing data. We have different types here, so we can say internal disk for use with Linux systems only, and it calls that ext4. And we can do for use with Windows, NTFS. For use with all systems and devices, it tells you FAT. Let's see what it's got. Other down here. Let's see what options it gives us under other.
If you have the Fuse modules installed for exFAT, exFAT will be in there. So if I don't want to do the command line, this is how I will create new exFAT flash drives so that I can use them with Windows, I can use them with Apple file systems, and I can use them with all the Linux file systems that have the exFAT Fuse module installed.
All right, perfect. So other gave us another screen, and it says XFS, which we talked about that briefly. It's similar to ext4. Linux swap partition. We didn't talk about swap. ButterFS, exFAT, and no file system. We just make a blank partition.
Yeah.
Just like you did in FDisk. So when we made it in FDisk, it knew that it was a Linux partition type, but it didn't say it was EX. It didn't give it a file system. So I guess this would be similar to that if you wanted to just make a blank partition. So let me ask you this. What's the best option for if you were trying to format a flash drive that you wanted to use both on your Linux box and your Windows box?
exFAT.
exFAT.
Yep. So on Linux, you do have to do a little bit extra work. You have to install exFAT -utils and exFAT what is it?
exFAT has some limitations, doesn't it, when it comes to file sizes?
No, exFAT is what got rid of that. The
okay.
FAT32 had that.
FAT32, yeah.
Had that 2 gig limit, 2, 3, 4 gig limit, whatever it was. And then exFAT was the next logical step, which got rid of that limitation.
Right, and Linux can use NTFS.
Correct. So there's nothing wrong with using NTFS as well. The thing that I was really concerned about with exFAT is that I was able to write things on Apple as well. And as far as I understand, unless they have changed that in Catalina or recently, Apple cannot write to NTFS partitions without spending like $9.99 for some kind of module to make it work.
And if I remember right, there's still an issue where if you don't shut down, if you're dual booting and you don't shut down Windows properly, then you could have trouble accessing your NTFS drives.
That's quite possible because Windows does do that locky thing where, especially with hibernation and all that.
It does the check, the file system check or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. exFAT has always treated me well. I've been using it for the past 2-3 years, and I haven't had really many issues with it. And it's not journaling or anything like that. So it should just drop everything straight onto the disk, and that you do lose a little bit of speed on that, but overall, I'd rather it just be easy.
Yeah, so I think that's a practical use case here. If you guys were mentioning that you needed to have the exFAT libraries and stuff installed. I haven't installed anything additional on my laptop, so it must just be by default in Linux Mint. Everything I've done here has been vanilla. So if you were a user that needed to set up a flash drive to use between your Windows system that hopefully you're phasing out to use Linux Mint, then disks is the utility that you would use to do that. And if you follow these steps, that would be a practical use case for that. I want to go back to my command prompt and I want to look at our partition. I want to look at our disk list now to see how it looks.
While you're looking at that, one other practical use case is creating a flash drive for use with time shift. This is what I've recently done with a couple of SD cards. I got 128 gig SD card. So I was talking about that G-Skill one earlier, and that's what I bought it for, 128 gig for time shift to just drop all the files onto that card. And yeah, just in case, you never know, man. I can't lose this recording studio laptop thing, so I'm trying to keep it safe.
I'm trying to get LSBLK to list with the labels. You don't happen to know that off the top of your head, do you?
Oh, not off the top. I know there's a way to do it, though, because there's a ton of options that you can use with LSBLK as well as DF. But I don't know it off the top of my head.
I'm looking at the help page real quick. Okay, so -A gives you all devices.
Yeah, you would need dash. Well, you could do. Oh wow, you could do LSBLK -- output -all, and it'll give you all the columns. But if you only want the labels, you can do -o, and then type in all in caps label, and that will just give you the label column. So there, yeah, those are both extremes. You'll only get the one column versus all the columns. But the idea with that is LSBLK can show you exactly what you want. You just have to get the output list correct.
Oh wow! If you do it that way, it literally shows you only the labels.
Yep, absolutely. So
but
you can go in and throw in like so name, comma, label, comma, UUID, comma, size, comma. So there's a few things that you can do.
Yeah, that's a lot. We don't need to do all that. The UUID is pretty nice though. We'll revisit this for the FS tab episode. Maybe that'll be the next one.
Proper FS tab usage.
And yeah, I know everybody puts in /dev, but what if your disk order changes and you can't boot anymore? I will never say that has happened to me, but it certainly has. All right, so that was partitions. I guess we should talk about swap. What notes did I put in here for swap? Okay, so the make swap and the swap on commands. I don't have an example for this because I don't want to screw up my system. But if you wanted to, you would make the partition in the same way that you did with fdisk or with GPT or with gdisk. But then whenever you go to set the file system type, instead of picking ext4, ext3, xfs, instead of doing all those, you would do mk swap space and then the location of the partition that you're making swap. Now, you would also, in order to make this a usable swap, you'd have to have it in your FS tab, so that every time your system booted, it would mount it in the right location. But once you have all that set up, and we can maybe we can hold this over until the FS tab episode. But the swap on command would be the command that you would use to tell the system that they can now use that area as swap.
Yep. And so one of the things that you need to know about swap is that overall, you're probably not going to be configuring this at all most of the time. If you're just installing this on a laptop or something like that, swap's handled for you by itself. And we don't even do swap partitions anymore since Ubuntu 18.04. There's a swap file that we use. Now, the cool thing, though, about creating a swap. So why you want to tune in for the next Linux Innards so that we can talk about FSTab and all this other stuff, let me tell you why you actually want one of these things. Back in, I think it was like Windows 7, Windows 8, they brought out this idea of something called Ready Boost. And what it would do is you could plug a flash drive in and ask if you wanted to use Ready Boost. And the idea with that was that you have 4 gigs of RAM, you use 8 gigs of RAM on the regular, and instead of swapping to your slow disk, if you have a faster flash drive, it would just use that as what Windows calls virtual memory, but Linux calls swap. So what you can do is pretty much everything Bo was talking about, right? Just do a partition on a flash drive, but instead of formatting it as ext4, format it as swap. Swap on, and then you would be able to use a Ready Boost-like solution when you are in a low RAM situation and you do not want to involve your disk, your main system disk, in that transaction, right?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes flash drives can be faster than spinning disk drives. So if you're on a spinning disk drive, it might be advantageous for you to do that. But, I mean, if you're on an SSD, yeah, there's no point.
Question.
Answer.
The question is, how big a swap drive do we need these days? It used to be the swap had to be about the same size as your memory, but as you get more memory and less use of it, you don't really need, for instance, if you had 32 megs of RAM, 32 gigs of RAM, you don't need a 32 gig swap file.
So here's the practical answer that's been happening. As far as tests go, usually about 1-to-1. But right, these systems are having 32 gigs of RAM now, 64 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of RAM. There's no one on Earth that is going to dedicate an entire 128 really fast disk, or at least a partition of that disk, just to swap. So what we're seeing in response to the growing number of RAM is just use a swap file. But it does still present the same problem that you're just writing it to disk. And this is one of those problems that you can fix with this the USB swap disk thing that I was talking about a second ago. But most people are just going to get the swap file.
Right. Well, in a lot of cases, a lot of people might say that you don't necessarily need swap because you're not using all of your RAM. And this isn't exactly true because swap is also used for, what is it, hibernation?
Mm-hmm. And
so
which I don't ever use.
Right. You do need to be able to take everything that you are currently running and storing it onto disk. Yeah,
and one of the other things is just simply that Linux likes to use your memory. So does Windows, and so does Mac OS. But they just don't show it to you. If you do the free command, you can actually see that you have 2 different values. And this is getting way off topic, I know, but since it came up, you have this used value, free value when you type in free. You do like free-h, and it'll give you like readable numbers. So free is 11 gigs, available is 16 gigs, and on this machine I've got 20 gigs total. So like, what's the difference between free and available? So that's a topic for another time. But the idea behind all of that is that Linux likes to do caching and buffering and shared resources and all this other kind of stuff, and try to do it before you get to it, so that your system will run a little bit faster or something like that. But the moral of the story is unused RAM is wasted RAM. So Linux tries to take advantage of a lot of your free RAM.
I'm just bringing it up because the Galago Pro came with a 4 gig partition for swap. It was 16 gigs of RAM on it, and it just did not fit the 1-to-1 ratio that I was raised with,
Yeah, and I think that might have been, it probably shipped with 4 gigs and then got a 16 gig upgrade after the fact, and no one ever reinstalled the OS.
Nope, that's not the cause, but...
Well, then, I don't know why it chose 4.
In theory, it shipped with 32 gigs. I don't know why it got downgraded to 16 by the previous user.
Yeah, and it could have just been swapping in and out of hardware, reinstalling OSs, and it just caught it like that. But yeah, you typically wouldn't see that happen. So, I don't know.
Well, I don't think I do anything to use 16 gigs of RAM anyhow, so I don't think it's an issue, but I thought I'd ask.
Sure.
Well, I think that covers this lesson.
Cool.
Thank you again, Leah.
Of course.
There will be a short quiz next period.
Oh, yes, please. All right. Well, then that'll do it for our Linux innards. Hope you learned something, and we'll move on down to vibrations from the ether. So in this section, we get corrected a little bit for good reason. Benjamin Moser writes in that if you're recording 2 p.m. CDT this Sunday, UTC time will be 7 p.m., 1 hour earlier for non-US show participants. So yeah, this is me being an idiot and not realizing that not everybody observes DST at the same time. Turns out, Tony, what did you say DST is at the end of March for y'all?
Yeah. We go over to what we call summertime on the 29th of March at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, so that means that, at least for the time being, it's going to be 2 p.m. CDT, at least for the next show, 2 p.m. CDT, 7 p.m. Tony's time, UK time. So UTC doesn't actually change, though, right? UTC will continue to be 7.
No, next time it'll be UTC 7 because there'll only be a 4-hour gap. But once our clocks go forward an hour, it'll be UTC 8 because UTC and Greenwich Mean Time. Oh, just a minute. No.
See, this is why I hate it.
Yeah.
We are all confused.
Yes. We'll be on GMT +1, which I think is UTC +1. So
right.
yes, UTC will stay the same.
All right, I'm going to try and take a look at this and make sure the numbers are right for the next show. For the next few shows, because the next show is going to be what we're saying here: 2 p.m. CDT, 7 p.m. UTC. But for
I will promise to have it right in
that's
the
right
IRC.
For the next show,
Yay.
definitely, yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so Benjamin, thanks for writing in. I appreciate that. We'll get everything corrected. And as far as messaging goes, I think I had that ready to go before the show, which is good. All right. Well, thanks for writing in. I appreciate that. And I really do appreciate the time. Well, I don't appreciate the time shift, but I appreciate you letting us know about the time shift. I think that's the whole issue with us relying on our phones. My phone just changed. I don't even know. I don't know. When is DST anymore? I just see my phone. My phone tells me the time, and I'm just there when it says I need to be there.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
I had to change my microwave this morning, but everything else set itself.
Yeah, that's disorienting. My microwave and my stove were wrong today, and I'm like, wait a minute, what? So next up, we have Dave Lindbergh wrote in. He had heard the episode that I am a fan of ARPGs, and we were talking about, I think, Diablo. But he said he's been a Diablo fan since the 90s. Loved it up till now. Diablo 3 with needing to be online to play. with Activision deactivating Blizzard Net accounts if being played on Linux. Torchlight 2 is good, but Victor Vran, great, maybe, yeah. Brings back memories of the original Diablo, but with better graphics, good music, good gameplay. You can jump in this ARPG. So I am really looking forward to Torchlight 3. I think it was going to be called like Torchlight Forge or something or another, but they changed the name to just Torchlight 3, which I'm looking forward to it. There's been mixed reviews about it from the beta testers, but I'm excited. I hope it releases for Linux, so we can continue on with this Torchlight goodness. But I played a lot of the original Torchlight. I did not play much of Torchlight 2.
I took a look. Yeah, I enjoyed Torchlight 2. I didn't play much of Torchlight 1, but I took a look at the Victor Vran game, and it looks pretty good. I've put it on my list. Like all the DLC and everything, if you're going to buy it all at once, is $40. So I'm waiting for it to go on Steam sale, and
I see.
then I'll pick it up.
Yeah,
I'll
it looks
take a look
cool.
at that one. I didn't actually get to take a look at that one.
It's a lot like, it looks a lot like Diablo, except
Yeah,
you can
it
jump.
does. Yeah, that's basically Diablo 3 in these screenshots. That's really close. Wow, yeah, totally gonna take a look on that one for sure. All right, and next up is Larry Murphy, but Moss is gonna take this one.
Why not? Says to mintCast, hi guys, I just found out about this program from Jason Evangelo's podcast. I just installed it. It's called GTK Stress Test, and it works well. I thought if you didn't know about it, I'd let you know, after all I learned about Stacer from your show. It has a lot of good information about your hardware. As always, you guys do a great show, and thanks again for all the good work.
Yeah, I think I mentioned I wanted to test this out, and then I didn't get a chance to do it, but it looks fantastic. So, all right, if I promised it last time, I'll promise it again, and I'll definitely have it in, because you can get it through FlatHub, so that makes it super duper easy. All right, so definitely want to test it out. All right, next up is George from Tulsa. So he comes and says, about our previous deeper dives, he says, don't doubt some listeners get value from these kinds of discussions, and we're right in to say so. But this is a podcast about Linux Mint, which tops most recommendations for new users. Imagine a prospective Linux user Googles up Mint to try, and mintCast as a podcast about Mint. Hypothetical new Mint user says to herself, I'll give mintCast a listen and maybe hear useful things on how to install and use Linux Mint. Her first episode is 329.5. She listens a few minutes and runs screaming in terror. 329.5 just affirmed every scary thing she's heard about Linux being difficult and nerdy. She's lost to Linux, and you'll never hear from her. If you're going to run these deep dives, you'll need to clearly identify them separate episodes. mintCast Advanced is a suggestion. The niche mintCast needs to fill isn't network and server administration, it's Mint for desktop users. The Mint that's easy to install, maintain, and use. At this time, Moss, who's been absent, is about the only member of the cast who brings content that might help typical Mint users. The topic
Thanks.
Yeah, the topic of permissions. In all the detail of 329.5, this simple question where most users are likely to first encounter permissions was buried in the sea of details and, well, not really addressed. How do I fix a you don't have a permissions error when I try to open a file? Begin with the GUI, not the command line. Explain what the GUI options are and what changing them does to help the user. So, Bo, you responded first?
Yeah, I responded with I think you did a really good job pointing out a blind spot here, or I thought I said a potential blind spot, but I agree that we may have gotten sidetracked to more sysadmin side of the topic. This is due to the fact that I'm studying for the exam. As you mentioned, we have heard positive feedback, and I'm sure it may help others prepping for an entrance level Linux certification. That being said, I very much agree with you that we should include, even at the front of the conversation, the topic of the GUI side and likely issues new users could face that the deep dive topic may solve. Thank you, sir.
And Joe follows up.
I said, nah, I don't take it personally. You were not the only person to comment on my deep dives, and it is good to hear opinions on the show. We also go back and forth between easier topics and more difficult topics. Plus, your comments were not rude, others were.
And I'd like to add that we have trouble finding topics for each show. We have to make these up as we go along.
Yeah.
Sometimes we come up with something that's easy to understand. Sometimes one of our members has a need. In this case, the last 2 episodes have been Bo needing to study for this exam, and it just was a way to cover some topic that hadn't been covered otherwise.
Yeah, the point of his email that I kind of felt like I really agreed with, and what I meant by my response was that I was, especially the previous episode, was really deep diving into the sysadmin side of it. I can still use these innards as a way to study for the exam, but talk more about how it reflects the desktop user as opposed to the sysadmin. And that's why we kind of, the scenarios of this week's innards involved something that I think that a desktop user would face as opposed to a sysadmin. So I definitely did take note of that from his email, and just like Joe said, I thought he was I think this was good criticism. I think he was very respectful in his approach.
Yeah, for sure.
And we would love to hear from our listeners what topics you'd like to have us cover.
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't write this to him yet, so I'm just kind of this is my response, but I feel like there's certainly a middle way, and talking about the GUI is certainly a middle way, but I don't know that this elusive brand new Linux user thing is really a huge part of the market. I think a lot of people that are getting into Linux already have a bit of a computing background, so they might be really, really familiar with Microsoft or something like that.
Right.
But on the other side of that coin, Linux has a rep for being difficult because it is difficult. I mean, if you dig into the terminal for anything, it's absolutely going to be difficult. And there are always, and you're right, and this is where we should highlight more. There is a GUI way to do just about everything, and we should highlight that because there is an easy way. But I think a lot of people get into Linux because they are tinkerers, and
Yeah.
I don't know that there are going to be a huge swath of people that are new getting into Linux that tend to have that tinkery vibe that won't at least stomach some terminal shenanigans. So while I agree, it may turn you off a little bit to what's going on, I don't know that it'll make you run away screaming. Because
On
Linux
the
has
other
that rep for a reason.
hand, talk to me about how difficult things are when we're doing an episode on how to edit your Windows registry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Right?
Windows can be as complicated. Have you looked at PowerShell lately? But that gets into the
Oh
sysadmin
my
thing.
God.
Yeah, but I think you've got 3 sysadmins on this show.
Yeah.
So I think you're gonna get some sysadmin content eventually, and it's gonna probably, some of these topics are gonna be the hard way. But you had mentioned the infamous "you don't have permission to do that." You know what's funny about that though is that if you Google that, I guarantee you, I 100% guarantee you, you're not gonna get a GUI answer. It's going to tell you to open up the terminal. It's going to tell you to find your file. It's not going to mention CD, how to get to your file. It's not going to talk about relative paths. It's not going to talk about absolute path. It's going to tell you run chmod +x on your file.
Honestly, if I were telling someone how to do it and they, had the file browser open and were looking at the file, I would tell them to right-click next to the file, click open in terminal, and then type such and such.
Yeah,
because that's the quickest way to do it.
Yeah, but George's suggestion was the GUI, and the GUI is a pretty easy way to do it too. You right-click on it, hit Properties, check the box that says Allow it to be executable. So he's definitely got a good suggestion there.
Yeah.
But I think overall, you're not going to get that recommendation unless you got a Mint user that is really good at Linux and a Mint user that is just learning, and those two people interact.
Well,
Then,
Go ahead, Tony.
I was just about to say, can I, in the sense of where he's coming from for a new user, maybe we're not the right podcast. I know that might sound strange because Linux Mint is one of those distros that gets recommended for a new user, but mintCast itself maybe not. Over the years that mintCast has run, there's been lots of different technical episodes, but there are other podcasts out there, and the one that comes to mind for me, which was very useful for it in my early days, was Going Linux, and they're very new user focused.
I would say that not all of our episodes are new user friendly. Some of them might not even be, mid-range user friendly. Some of it's very deep, and you need a bit of a knowledge base to do it. But then again, we also do have episodes where we're doing something simple and showing it saying it step by step.
I'm not saying we never do that, Joe. I'm just saying there may be other podcasts out there that meet the new users
just focus
need
on that.
a little bit better than we do.
I find mintCast to be about as low level as there is. I mean, Going Linux has been a good podcast from time to time, but one of their two co-hosts is very anti-mint. So, I wouldn't send someone over there when they just come on to Linux Mint, as George is suggesting.
I feel like anybody that's dedicated enough to learning Linux that they're listening to a podcast, for entertainment, that is about the Linux distribution that they're learning, would appreciate the types of topics that we talk about. I just think that it's important that we remember that there are those listeners also, and we should try to reflect it from a desktop perspective as opposed to a sysadmin perspective.
That's absolutely right.
Right
on that side, that's absolutely right. And I think it's good to remember that I think the show is more than just a new user show too, right? Because we do new user topics, as Joe was saying, we do the mid-range topics, and then we do the high-level topics as well. But we're at the most of it. We're a show about Linux, and with a bit of a focus on Linux Mint.
And next show, Linux from scratch.
Yeah.
Next 6 months worth of shows.
I mean, like I did my whole this 3 weeks ago. I did my whole biweekly wandering about Ansible. And I doubt most desktop users are using Ansible. So, I think that's an example of where I, as a person that, I do a lot of sysadmin stuff. I think that, but I also am just a super Linux fan, and I do projects at home that are desktop Linux facing. And I'm going to try to remember to highlight those on more occasions than the other.
And if I knew more of this stuff, I would be working in Linux admin instead of at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Hey, Moss, when are you going to install cubes?
I am not going to install cubes to the best of my knowledge.
So I think what we as a team should focus on is just, keeping these people, because we have people that are interested in the sysadmin side of stuff, and we have people that are not interested in the sysadmin side of stuff. And as long as everybody brings something to the table, then we're going to hit the widest audience that we can possibly get. And while you can't please all people all the time, you can please some people some of the time.
Yeah, you may have noticed I was very quiet on tonight's episode on the innards.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's okay. You can do the next email.
Okay. Well, this email's from Chris, and he says, "Hi, Tony, Josh, and friends. First of all, a big thank you for maintaining the legacy of one of the most important FOSS and Linux podcasts. You're doing a great job. I'm just wondering if you could shed some light on the infrastructure you're using to record this wonderful podcast. I suppose the general approach hasn't changed since you took over from Rob and Isaac, but I'm curious about the details, such as if you are using Mumble like pretty much the rest of the community, and if so, what the details are. Looking forward to hearing from you with pointers, and thanks in advance for your help. Cheers, Chris." So I responded literally this evening, because this is only a couple of days old, this email. "Hi, Chris. Yes, we do use Mumble to record the show, although all the hosts record locally using Audacity, unless it all goes pear-shaped. This is the audio we produce the edit from. As for the mics and other hardware, we each use different hardware. I use a HP 3rd generation i7 Tower rig as my recording PC. Moss uses one of his laptops, etc., etc. We did a show about the show recording process. Offhand, I can't remember what number it was, but I'm pretty sure it was before we started to split the bi-weekly recordings into 2 shows, so we post weekly. Glad you're enjoying what we're doing.
Hey, real quick, there's usually like 2 or 3 pieces of hardware that are involved in this, except for maybe Bo. Like, do you want to just do a round table real quick and just round up all the hardware that we use?
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm doing this whole show off a Lenovo T450S. I've got a Behringer UM2 XLR USB audio interface and an MXL 990 microphone. Everything else is Linux Mint, Audacity, and Mumble. I mean, like the rest of the group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, in my case, okay, go ahead, Tony.
I was just going to say, in addition to what I've said, I use a ProSound mic on a boom stand, generic set of headphones, which I just use for listening to the audio back. The mic is a USB mic, and everything works out fine.
Okay, I'm on a Galago Pro 2, which was donated to me by a listener, Jackie Moore. And for a microphone, I'm using a Blue Yeti, which Joe Ressington says is a horrible mic for podcasting. And that's about it. I don't have any interfaces or anything.
Well, I got my laptop, the GE72 6QD from MSI, and then this Samsung Meteorite microphone, and an adjustable arm for that, and that's about it. Oh, and whatever headphones are handy. I think today it was the 99 Neos.
I would also point out that we use Google Docs to do our scripts on, and I could have said that a lot cleaner. For now, I keep trying to talk you into doing Markdown or something else, but we'd have to self-host it, and we have had some problems with our website lately, so the self-hosting might not always work.
I'm using the MXL BCD1. I also have a MXL 990, so I highly recommend that mic. It's a good mic. And my mixer is the Xenix 6222FX. I don't have the USB model because I've had this before. I've had this for a long time. Yeah, I could do a whole podcast where I just talk about my podcast setup. So I'll have to just shut up now.
And I think that needs to happen again, because we did that show so long ago that I don't think anybody, except maybe that Blue Yeti, is the same piece of hardware that we were using prior to this.
Yeah, everybody's upgraded since then.
Yeah, I think I was using the Snowball back then.
I've still got the same monitor.
But this is a condenser mic, and the one that you're talking about is a dynamic mic. So, I mean, would you really recommend going dynamic over condenser?
I was saying I recommend the 990.
Oh, well, good. All right, sounds like I'm good then.
Yeah. No, I have both in here, and I really like the 990. That was the first mic I ever bought, and it's still one of my favorite mics.
Yep.
Well, I have noticed that my audio sounds different from most of the other guys, but some of that could be that I'm up against the wall that actually has a mirror on it. And this time I put a pillow across part of that, but it's not big enough to cover the whole mirror.
Yeah.
However, I am talking down toward it.
That's the thing that so I noticed the biggest improvement when I recently upgraded my wall treatments here.
Yep.
I did have those like cheap foam things you get off of Amazon, but recently I took all that down and I actually built a 3-inch air gap between my actual walls and moving blankets. I've got 2 layers of moving blankets that are 3 inches away from the wall, and apparently that air gap is what's important. And
provide some good insulation too.
yeah, it's a different temperature in this room than it is in the rest of the house. But I can tell it makes a difference because I recently mistakenly recorded an episode of ECN where we weren't using the microphones. We were actually using the camera mic, and honestly, it sounded okay. The direction of the microphone was just not accurate, but it sounded pretty good, and it's all thanks to the room treatment.
Nice. Yeah, that's same for me. I record out of a box, so I get a lot better sound out of that than I do if the mic was open air. I just need I
Oh,
need better room, I think.
I forgot one important thing in my podcasting rig here, and that's my comfy chair.
Oh, that helps.
Yep.
Yeah, I would point out, I pointed out that bit about the mirror in the background because I'm not willing to blame my wonderful Blue Yeti microphone for my bad sound, regardless of what Joe Ressington says.
All right, before we record an entire another podcast, we should get out of here.
Right.
Because, yeah, don't threaten me with a good time. I'll do that.
It's not even been 2.5 hours yet. What are you complaining about?
That's true.
Right? We get everybody back and we have a short show.
I know, right? All right, well, let's head out of here. Let's move into check this out. So it looks like we only have a couple of things that are in our check this out section, but one that I am really, really, really excited about is, so a few years ago there was this idea of, well, maybe just a year or two ago, there was this idea of OpenSnitch. So it's like, it's basically just an application that tells you what the things, software on your computer are connecting to on the internet. It is a network snitch. It will tell you everything. And it looks like it looked like about a year ago, OpenSnitch was just dead. The developer didn't want to do it anymore, so he just abandoned the whole project. But it looks like a gentleman by the name of Gustavo forked it about 8 months ago and has been playing around with it. So it looks like if it's not available to you now, OpenSnitch, the fork, will be available to you soon enough. And this is really cool because if you're ever on the paranoid side of wondering what your computer is doing, OpenSnitch will tell you. That is important to those of us that are, a little cynical, a little paranoid. Yeah, that's you. And Mosh, you've got a couple of things.
Yeah, the first one is Voco Screen NG. This is coming from It's Foss. It's an open source screencasting tool. I don't know anything about it, but it looked really interesting, and well, you can always trust It's Foss to find good stuff. And it looks like it's got good features and everything. I haven't successfully done any screencasting at this point, so I just thought it needed to be brought up. The other is Foss Post. Has a really good article on why use Ubuntu instead of other Linux distributions. And it makes some really good points, and I think you should read it. There are links in the show notes.
All right. Well, then all we have is one announcement, which is the obvious. Next episode will be at live March 22nd, 2 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. UTC. So thank you again for that. We'll have it right this time and probably the next time too. So I want to let everybody throw their information out there. Joe, where can we get more of you outside of the show?
Well, you can catch the other podcasts I'm on, and that's the Linux Link Tech Show, and you can get that at www.tllts.org. The Linux Lugcast, www.linuxlugcast.com. You can find me on MeWe, or you can send me an email, jb@mintcast.org.
And Bo, what about you?
Well, normally last week I said ecnradio.com, but then I just realized this weekend that my certificate expired there. So,
oh, were you the Let's Encrypt guy? Did you get hit by that?
I don't know. I don't know what happened, but my I was using Let's Encrypt and my certificate is expired. I've not investigated it yet because I've been busy. But if you go to undercastnetwork.com, that certificate is good and safe, and it won't ask you to verify. You can go there and you can check out the podcast that I do there.
And Moss, what about you?
Well, I probably need to rewrite all my websites, but you can find me at Triad Bardic College, at Peaceful Hippo, on MeWe. My music's on Bandcamp and my YouTube channel and Robert Warren's YouTube channel. You can email me at moss@mintcast.org or at distrohoppersdigest@gmail.com. And please take pity on me. I do have a sponsors, and I do accept donations from just about anyone. Single donations. No one has joined my sponsors yet. I've had it for how many months now, and not a single sponsor at this point. But I have gotten some really good stuff from our listeners, for which I am intensely grateful.
Tony Hughes, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm on Hacker Public Radio, host ID 338. I do an occasional blog, although I've not done it for quite some time, at tony-hughes.blogspot.com. I'm on Twitter, TonyH1212. You can email me at distrohelpersdigest@gmail.com, and I'm on th@mintcast.org.
And Tony Watts is not here this time, but you can get him at tw@mintcast.org or Echoes of Savages, wherever you can search things. So we'll go with Google and YouTube on that one. Josh, also not here, but you can find him at josh@mintcast.org, josh@edublocks.org, edublocks.org, and at all_about_code on Twitter. And myself, leochavez.org, and at leochavez on Twitter. And you can get your 5-minute news digest at Full Circle Weekly News. About that website, I think I'm going to put all these notes that I've been milling about in Telegram on that site, finally. But before we leave, we wanted to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Josh for all his work on the website and the live stream, Bytemark Hosting for hosting mintcast.org and our Mumble server, archive.org for hosting all of our audio files, the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about, and in Telegram, Hobstar is putting us together a maybe new logo.
Thanks, Hob.
And Clem.
And Clem. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks,
Clem.
Clem.
Thank you, everybody. Well, that'll do it. Cool,
that will do it. Yay.
That's awesome. By the way, that logo is really good.
Mm-hmm. Stopping the Audacity recording. Export. Export audio.
Oh, let's see how long of a section where it randomly switched mics on me that I had.
Oh, man.
I have no idea. Because, I double-checked it at the start. Because I had that problem when I first opened it up.
Yeah.
And most of it looks good. Scrolling.
I forgot to mention, I do have a new set of headphones. They are not good headphones, but they are neutral headphones. I've got some Tascam TH02s, and while they are okay for listening to music, they've got like a very flat characteristic on sound. So I'm going to start using these for editing the show.
Yeah, that's good.
I've just proven that I can wear them for 2.5 hours and my ears will only slightly hurt. So I think I plan on upgrading them to some better ear pads or something like that. But other than that, $16. You cannot beat these headphones at $16.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys, yesterday we were talking about doing a mintcast at night, or just a more freeform mintcast, or not, I don't even know if we want to call it mintcast.
Just us all talking crap.
Also, yes, those of you that are crazy enough to be listening to the live show right now, you are getting like a super preview.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I can facilitate that. If you guys want to do that, we can do that. We can figure out all the details of posting it somewhere, and the RS. We can figure all that out later. If you guys are interested in doing that, I would be down to host that.
I wish you'd call it super early morning, and then it'd be at a social time for us over at this side of the pond.
True.
I think we were going to change it to Linux in the corner pocket.
Yeah.
So no, see, for us, it'll be like we get angry and then we go to bed, and then for y'all, it'll be like as soon as you wake up, you can just be angry. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, here's what I was thinking is the stuff that we talk about on the show that's not specific to Linux. Maybe we could bring those topics to this other show. Not that you couldn't still talk on. I could do
a sourdough baking course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just us all talking about all the fun stuff that we like to do.
Linux off topic or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. You guys think about it. I'm serious. I'll
As long as we're
I'll
allowed
do
to
it.
swear like sailors, I am down.
I have to fight it for this show, and I've been slipping
Yeah.
up lately.
I do
I've
too.
never been
I
a
really
sailor, but I don't know.
do. I
Well,
think the only
technically-
reason.
I've never been a sailor either, but I've heard plenty of them cuss.
Yeah, I think the only reason I can get by on this show is because for work I actually have to not swear. So I've got a lot of practice.
The my old co-host, he says that the way he keeps from swearing on podcasts is he pretends like his mom's in the room. And I said,
Yeah.
"Oh, great! So
That
she's
wouldn't work for
swearing at me."
Yeah, that wouldn't work for me.
Well, it would work for me, but that's okay. My mom is still hanging on. She's back at home, getting occasional help, which is really odd, as she's been. Before they sent her home about a month ago, she had been either hospital or rehab home for 4 months. And I think she's been in hospital or rehab more in 2019 than she was at home.
Wow.
I don't know how long she's got. And she's 1,800 miles away from me, so there's not much I can do about it.
How old is she, Moss?
90.
90. Ooh.
I gotta say, and not to not get too far off the somber note, there was a guy named, I guess that's Sputnik 4, left some stuff on the YouTube channel, and okay, so it's like an alien head with a green shirt. He's doing the live long and prosper thing with a thumbs up. He's got some jeans and some feet, right? But
Yeah, I've got it.
yeah, so okay, hold on. So explain to me what this burst of air is. What is this burst of air? Because it's right by the pants, and it's I see that, and I'm like, either the show was so good his pants flew off, or we're about as good as a fart. One of the two.
I was going to say it's a whoopee cushion.
Yeah. See, I don't know what you're trying to convey, Mr. Alien Sputnik 4 guy.
Well,
but,
my audio is uploaded, folks. Yay.
I'm gonna assume it's a good
Mine's
thing.
on the way.
Well, we need to go do some grocery shopping and
Well,
whatnot.
I was gonna mention that like it switched mics at about the 1 hour 8 minute mic mark, and then I found it at the 1 hour 57 minute mark. So there's like 50 minutes of bad
Is that
audio
when
in
Leo
there.
was yelling at you to turn your mic off?
Yeah,
I
I
mean-
think so. That sounds about right, because there was a bunch of background noise coming out of your stuff, Joe. So, Bo, when you're doing the edit, you might want to just quiet that.
Yeah,
All right, so hold on one second. Let me take notes on this.
because I'm pretty sure
About
my kids were
108 to
talking in the
157.
background too.
Yeah, while I was doing my work and you find me type stuff, my kitten got into a box and was making a lot of noise, so that's going to be fun.
So I'm sure some of my, because it looks like I was talking through a couple of parts of that too. So my audio was probably garbage in that section. I don't know what the hell happened, if my USB mic disconnected and then it switched to the mic internal to the laptop, because
Yeah.
I disconnected the camera.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me. I don't know why it happens. Matter of fact, that's what was wrong with the last episode of ECN, was that it was using my webcam instead of my microphone.